Chapter 15-17. Since they were bound to each other, why not go to hell together? After a long time, Nie Yang heard the voices of another group of people. You brought them? Yes. Do you want to inspect them? Yes. After the conversation, Nie Yang's sack was untied. Before he could adapt to the sudden sunlight, the person came forward and put something around his neck. He looked down and saw that it was a seal used by Taoists to summon gods. The seal was made of jade and had a unique and exquisite design. It was 7 inches long and 2.5 inches long. It was as white as snow. Even if he couldn't touch it with his hands, he could feel the cold air around it. What kind of process was this? Nie Yang frowned and turned to look at the other group of people. His pupils shrank when he saw what they were wearing. Weren't they soldiers under the enemy's command? Is the inspection done? The person pinched Nie Yang's face and smiled. Good quality goods. Tell your master that it's done before sunset. Humph, please don't play tricks. The person smiled. My master won't be able to eat or sleep in peace with such a monster alive. We are on the same page on this. Nie Yang had already guessed it, so he could more or less guess it. But the system was not so calm. Its voice was almost hoarse. Why is it the Sunfire Seal? The Sunfire Seal? Nie Yang was curious when he heard the unfamiliar term. You mean the thing hanging around my neck? He could hear the fear in the system, which made him feel better. He searched through everything he knew, but couldn't find anything related to the Sunfire Seal. If there's a Sunfire Seal, is there a Shuyin Seal? The system sneered and didn't answer. Nie Yang asked it. Is there something you're afraid of in this world? The system sneered. If I was at my peak, I wouldn't be afraid of this thing. It was almost destroyed, but who knew that dog money would repair it? In order to capture me, they are really generous. They are even willing to take out the 10 great ancient artifacts. The Sunfire Seal and the Shuyin Seal were a pair of artifacts. They could shock the Yin and Yang realms with terrifying power. Although their master had passed away many years ago, they were more than enough to suppress the system. In the silence, Nie Yang was brought to Jiangpingji. It really is you. The system had once said on the battlefield that the sword in Jiangpingji's hand was terrifying. Nie Yang was not surprised to see her today. Jiangpingji smiled and said, You don't seem surprised at all. You have a good mentality. It's a pity that you met the wrong person. Nie Yang was puzzled. You met a bad person? Jiangpingji said. The thing in your body calls itself the system, right? Do you know how evil that thing is? What it gives you is far less precious than what it steals from you. If it hadn't interfered, your future would be much better than it is now. If Nie Yang hadn't been instigated to poison in advance, Nie Yang wouldn't have stood on the stage, let alone taken control of the Nie family. Zixiao had said that in his previous life, the leader of the Nie clan was this sinister brat who didn't reveal himself. Nie Yang smiled bitterly. I never thought that the Duke of Lanting would be such a kind person. He was clearly a prisoner, but the tone of the other party's voice did not sound arrogant or unreachable. Jiangpingji used her thumb to press against the handle of the knife. The long knife was slightly unsheathed, and the white light on the blade was dim. Do you have any last words? Nie Yang asked. What will happen to it? Do you see my knife? If my knife is compared to a human, that thing is an edible meat to the knife. It will end up the way a human eats meat, Jiangpingji said. Other than that, do you have any last words? Nie Yang saw that she was calm, and his fear of dying lessened a lot. I do have one thing that I hope the Duke of Lanting can fulfill, Nie Yang said. I know that I have a clear conscience, but I still owe someone. After I die, I hope the Duke of Lanting can cremate my body. Burning my bones to ashes might be able to slightly appease the hatred in that person's heart. Since he couldn't escape death, he might as well die quickly and make his last words clear. Jiangpingji said, I've heard that when a person is about to die, his words are kind. Regardless of whether what you said is true or false, you still have a sense of responsibility. Nie Yang saw her pull out the long knife. His lips paled and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. And, the Duke of Lanting, you must not let that demon go. As soon as he finished speaking, a white light shone in front of him. Nie Yang felt a chill on his neck. His vision went black, and he didn't know what happened. Jiangpingji saw Nie Yang's head roll on the ground. His skin squirmed and changed into a strange face. Disgust flashed in her eyes. The system, this thing is really harmful. For the god-slaying knife, blood was far less delicious than the system. Due to the suppression of the seal, it couldn't leave Nie Yang's body. When the god-slaying knife swept past, the system was also forcibly sucked into the knife. The condensed spiritual energy turned into thousands of rays of blue light and was devoured by the god-slaying knife. Jiang Pingji raised the god-slaying knife and looked at it. Part of the totem on the blade had recovered. Judging by its size, it should be about 3/5 of the whole blade. She used her mind to examine the blade and found that the white misty object inside the blade had changed again. It had turned from a mist to a condensed flesh. The tube between the disintegrated spiritual energy of the system and the white ball was also 10 times thicker than before. Every time it was absorbed, the white ball would tremble and let out a faint thud, like a beating heart. As soon as she thought of this, she retracted her mind and said, I heard that some knives have a spirit. Is it possible that this thing is one too? Jiang Pingji couldn't suppress her curiosity and asked the old chief. He waited for a long time before replying. You Abba. The god-slaying knife you mentioned is the key to the Federation surviving this crisis. The thing inside is not a spirit. Jiang Pingji asked. Old chief, can you be more specific? You Abba. I signed a confidentiality agreement. Jiang Pingji said. You're not in the Federation. The confidentiality agreement is nothing. You Abba. The Federation was doomed to have such a reserve marshal. She took the lead in ignoring the confidentiality agreement. She was annoyed by Jiang Pingji's questions. She gave a simple reply and went offline. Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and snorted. Can a guilty conscience be solved by going offline? Looking at the god-slaying knife, Jiang Pingji murmured. It's true that the god-slaying knife can restrain the system, but it devours the system like it's food every time. It's weird no matter how I look at it. It makes me feel like an old mother who hunts down the system just to find food for her child. The god-slaying saber laid across her lap quietly, and without any reaction. Chapter 15:18. My lord, what should we do with Nie Yang's corpse? Wei Xi saw Jiang Pingji walk out of the tent, and hurriedly went forward to ask. Jiang Pingji said, Nie Yang's last words were that he hoped I could cremate his corpse. Cremate? Wei Xi was shocked. Although his lord liked to use fire to dispose of enemy and ally corpses on the battlefield, that was because the rotting of corpses could easily cause a large-scale plague. It was a last resort. Based on the current trend, corpses were not to be desecrated, not to mention cremation. Wasn't this what people thought of as burning the bones and scattering the ashes? He never expected that Nie Yang would be the one to suggest cremation. Why did he leave such a last word? Wei Xi could not figure it out. According to his understanding of Nie Yang in his previous life, he was not a kind person despite his young age. He said that he had a clear conscience, but he still owed someone. He made the decision to burn himself to death. Most likely, it had something to do with the person he owed. Perhaps he wanted to atone for his sins, Jiang Pingji said. I will fulfill his wish and return his ashes to Nie Yang. Yes. The moment Nie Yang died and the system was destroyed, not only did Nie Yang's corpse return to its original appearance, but Nie Qing, who was far away in the Nie camp, also felt an unfamiliar throbbing in his chest. A strange feeling came from all over his body, as if there were some worms wriggling on his body. Father-in-law. Nie Qing could not help but call out. Wei Yong and Fan Chen, who were patiently waiting outside, heard the commotion and rushed in. Young lord. My lord. As the two called out to him, they saw a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. They saw with their own eyes that Nie Qing's body had grown a little, his shoulders had widened, and his face had undergone a drastic change. Does the young lord feel unwell anywhere? Wei Yong saw that Nie Qing had returned to his original appearance, and heaved a sigh of relief. He hurriedly went forward to grab his arms and carefully examined him from head to toe. His eyes were overflowing with tears of excitement. When he realized that his actions were disrespectful, he hurriedly retracted his arms. Nie Qing said gently, There's no discomfort. Father-in-law, don't worry. Fan Chen went forward and smiled. In that case, The demon and Nie Yang have been executed? We don't have to worry anymore. Nie Qing had been about to smile, but hearing Nie Yang's words, the corners of his lips that had just risen stiffened, and he silently retracted them. Seeing his reaction, Wei Yong was a bit worried, but he didn't say anything else. Young master, this matter shouldn't be publicized. Nie Yang had slaughtered his own clan for his own selfish desires, and plotted to murder the young master. Now that he had been executed, the case could be considered closed, and the Nie clan could be given an explanation. Right now, the most important thing is to help the deceased master return home. Young master, rest a little tonight and set off tomorrow. With a few words, Wei Yong pushed the blame for Nie Liang's massacre of the Nie clan elders onto Nie Yang. In any case, Nie Yang was already a dead man. No matter how many scapegoats were thrown at him, would he be able to crawl out of the ground and protest? Nie Qing was distracted and listened to Wei Yong's arrangements. Not long after sunset, Jiang Pingji sent someone to place Nie Yang's ashes in a ceramic box and send it to the Nie camp. Nie Yang's last words were delivered along the way. Nie Qing didn't speak for a long time after hearing it. He stared at the urn of ashes in a daze, his thoughts unknown. Wei Yong asked him how he planned to deal with the urn of ashes. What Nie Yang had done was destined not to be buried in the ancestral grave. If Wei Yong were to decide, he wanted to scatter the ashes cleanly and let Nie Yang be a lonely ghost for the rest of his life. Nie Qing said, "Father-in-law, I want to bring him back to Bianzhou and find a place to bury him." He was already dead. Nie Qing didn't want to pursue the matter any further. Even if he scattered Nie Yang's ashes cleanly, what use was there besides venting his anger? Rather than torturing the souls of the dead, it was more like lashing the hearts of the living. Wei Yong said, "Everything shall be as the young master says." Nie Qing asked again, "As for Lu Shi, did father have any other instructions before he died?" The two armies were facing off against each other. They had only temporarily stopped fighting because of Nie Liang's funeral, but the battle that had to be fought still had to be fought unless one side retreated. Jiang Pingji currently had the upper hand. The Nie clan had suffered significant losses, but it hadn't reached the point where they had to retreat. Wei Yong said, "The late lord did make arrangements before he died, but because of Nie Yang's matter, it was temporarily put on hold." Nie Qing heaved a sigh of relief and said, "That's good. I'll have to trouble father-in-law with the matters at the front lines." Nie Qing could not be delayed in bringing the spirit back to his hometown. Nie Qing set off the next day. After secretly sending Nie Qing away, Wei Yong's expression darkened. He looked at Zhangjiang Pass with anger in his eyes. Even though Nie Yang had poisoned Nie Liang, it was Jiang Pingji who had angered Nie Liang over and over again and caused his early death. This debt had to be paid. Jiang Pingji looked at the letter of challenge in her hands and laughed involuntarily. She smiled helplessly and said, "I just helped them, and they're going to deal with me." The salted fish expressed their disdain. After all, they were the clearest about what Jiang Pingji had done. To Defecio, Wei Yong said that he wanted to deal with the streamer. Nie Liang's head is already over. If he didn't say anything, he would be slapping himself in the face. Gatorade. Streamer, this is called the villain complaining first. It's obvious that you angered Nie Liang to death first. It's not wrong for them to deal with you. Jiang Pingji shook her head. She raised her hand and slammed the letter of challenge on the table. She shouted loudly outside the tent, "Quickly get the military counselors here." Before the soldiers could lift their feet, they saw Qiguan Rang walking toward the commander's tent with a solemn expression. "Wen Zheng, you came just in time. I have something to talk to you about." Qiguan Rang said, "My lord, there's no hurry. I have an urgent report from Zhangzhou." Jiang Pingji reached out and took the letter from Qiguan Rang. She said, "Forget it. Nie Liang is dead. The Nie family is without a leader. Nie Qing is still a young and inexperienced child. He's not a big threat. What's happening in Zhangzhou? Why is Wen Zheng so anxious?" It was said to be an urgent report, but it was actually old news from a few days ago. Jiang Pingji opened the letter and read 10 lines at a glance. The more she read, the tighter her brows knitted. Flames rose in her heart. This group of gentry clans in Zhangzhou, are all of them itching for a beating? Jiang Pingji did not expect that the first problem they encountered would not come from Yang Tao's forces, but from the gentry clans in Jiangzhou. In order to further understand the water situation in Jiangzhou, Yang Si and the others advanced step by eliminating the water bandits. Later, they were obstructed by the navy under Yang Tao's command. Several small-scale water battles broke out between the two parties. They fought inextricably with their strong combat power. Looking at the battle situation, the gentry clans in Jiangzhou could not sit still. When they heard the news of Nieliang's death, the scales began to tilt in Jiang Pingji's favor. Yang Tao had fewer troops and was weak. Jiang Pingji could fight 2 against 1 with ease. The outcome of the battle was not optimistic. Chapter 15:19. As mentioned earlier, the waters in Jiangzhou were developed and pirates ran amok. These pirates, who had been operating for many years, seemed to be of humble origins, but in fact, they were inextricably linked to the officials of various counties. If not for that, it would not have been so difficult for Yang Jian to clear out the pirates back then. Of course, these relationships could not be exposed to the public, so they could only interact in secret. In order to protect their family business from being affected, some aristocratic families also had interests entangled with the pirates. They even had spies planted in these water bandits. Yang Si and the others used fishing to enforce the law, destroying many water bandits and recruiting many young and strong pirates. Among them were spies. Through these spies, the aristocratic families sent friendly messages to Fu Wang and the others, hoping to form a good relationship. Fu Wang and the others thought about it and knew that it was unreliable. They did not know if it was their own behavior or Yang Tao's instructions. Feng Zhen was from Jiangzhou's Anshan County and was a descendant of an aristocratic family. He was quite familiar with the tricks of this circle. He said, "I'm just testing them. Whether or not my lord can conquer Jiangzhou, it will be good for them. If Jiang Pingji conquered Jiangzhou, they would have a natural advantage by choosing sides in advance. Even if it was only a little, it would be good. If Jiang Pingji failed, and they did not show any obvious behavior of choosing sides, Yang Tao could not settle the score with them." Over the next few days, he received several letters from several families. Yang Si could not help but sneer and ridicule. Yang Tao hasn't fallen yet, but they can't sit still. They have no loyalty at all. Feng Zhen shook his head and said, "This is just their instinct to seek benefits and avoid harm." Fu Wang also said, "Such despicable people cannot be trusted." After all, Jiangzhou was Yang Tao's territory. Who knew if there were spies planted by him among these people who seemed to be surrendering? Although they were suspicious, they still had to accept the letter. Otherwise, it would be a loss to completely push them into Yang Tao's arms. It was better to hang around with an ambiguous attitude. When some aristocratic families saw that their goodwill did not receive a positive response, they were a little flustered. At this time, Fu Wang led the troops to attack Dafang, which was south of Jiangzhou. Qi Kuang was in charge of the navy. The troops were divided into 2 routes and advanced by water. Dafang was a small place. Due to its geographical advantage and convenient water route from south to north, it was relatively prosperous and had a large floating population. As one of Jiangzhou's gateways, Dafang had a certain military weight due to its smooth waterway and the advantage of connecting the north and the south. The county magistrate's surname was Xia, and he was born into a local aristocratic family. Seeing Fu Wang's army approaching menacingly, he immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Feng Zhen thought about it carefully, then smiled and said, "This person likes to sail with the wind and has a timid temperament. General, why don't you give him a scare?" Fu Wang looked at Feng Zhen. "How?" Feng Zhen said, "Secretly send a letter to them, ordering them to open the city gates and surrender in 3 days. Otherwise, we will slaughter all the commoners." Yang Si rolled his eyes at Feng Zhen. Was this kid for real? No matter which era it was in, massacres would always be criticized, and no one dared to speak of it lightly. Fu Wang shook his head and said, "No, if word of this gets out, it will inevitably damage the Lord's reputation." Feng Zhen said, "It's just to scare people. It's not like we're really mobilizing troops to massacre the city. General, please don't worry." Yang Xi's eyes almost rolled to the top of his head as he sneered. Feng Longzi, can't you come up with some reliable ideas? Feng Jin said. You don't know that Yang Jian's former subordinates aren't in Daifang. On the contrary, many of the local rich families have some minor conflicts with Yang Jian. Years ago, Yang Jian led troops to clear out the pirates and found out that a few of the rich families in Daifang were in cahoots with the pirates. If it weren't for the fact that someone was adamantly stopping him, Yang Jian would probably have killed them all. Knowing that defending the city was hopeless, they wouldn't sacrifice their lives to defend Daifang for Yang Tao. If we can take this place without bloodshed, it will more or less serve as a deterrent. This will also be a great boost to the morale of our army. Yang Xi said, there's always a chance. Feng Jin said, if they refuse to surrender, then we'll use troops to knock down the city gates of Daifang. After that, we'll frame the massacre on the county magistrate guarding the city. We'll say that he's afraid of the might of our army and worried that the commoners will flee, so he purposely spread rumors to discredit the Lord. It's just a matter of a few words. History books were written by the victors, and the losers had no right to speak. After hearing this, Yang Xi revealed an indescribable expression. He cupped his hands at Yang Xi and said in a strange tone, this humble one is convinced. When Feng Longzi was shameless, he was almost comparable to the Lord. He had lost. Fu Wang adopted Feng Zhen's opinion and issued a letter of challenge. When County Magistrate Xia saw Fu Wang's threat, his legs suddenly turned to jelly. According to the letter of challenge, Fu Wang would lead the 80,000 troops to attack Daifang. If they didn't know what was good for them, the 80,000 troops could trample Daifang to the ground with 1 foot. If he resisted stubbornly, the result would be the lives of his family and the lives of all the commoners in the city. What should we do? There are only 8,000 troops in the city. How can we fight against 80,000? County Magistrate Xia was indeed as Feng Zhen had said. He had a timid personality and didn't have his own opinions at critical moments. People didn't know how good Jiang Pingji's troops were in water battles, but they were good at sieging cities. The advisor asked, did the Duke of Zhengzhe not send reinforcements? County Magistrate Xia was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He couldn't help but complain. Yang Tao's troops are short on horses and there are gaps everywhere. How can he care about Daifang? The letter has already been sent out. The earliest reinforcements will arrive as 7 or 8 days. How can we withstand the ravages of those animals? Yang Tao also had his own difficulties, but County Magistrate Xia wouldn't understand. Instead, he was full of complaints. Do you think Fu Wang and the others will really massacre the city? Mu Xian said. It's hard to say. Lu Shi is restrained by the Nie family, and most of his troops are trapped in the north. Fu Wang has led troops to attack Zhangzhou for a long time, but he hasn't achieved anything yet. If we use the massacre to intimidate everyone, Fu Wang will encounter fewer obstacles when he attacks Zhangzhou from the south. The people in Zhangzhou weren't of one mind. The gentry all had their own plans. If they saw that things weren't going well, they would easily jump ship. If they used the massacre to show their strength, they might really be able to scare the counties along the way into surrendering. County Magistrate Xia became even more flustered when he heard this. The advisor continued, we can roughly tell whether the situation is favorable or not. This is especially true for the strength of the 2 feudal lords. Lu Shi's troops are strong, and the Navy's combat power is also extraordinary. On the other hand, Yang Tao has spent too much of his troops in the alliance with Nansheng. How can he have the strength to deal with Lu Shi now? In my opinion, even if County Magistrate is doing this for the safety of the people in the city, you have to consider this letter of challenge carefully. No matter how sturdy the Daifang was, could it compare to the passes and cities that Jiang Pingji had previously pried open as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood? In terms of military strength, they only had 10% of the enemies. Not even the shadow of the reinforcements could be seen. They couldn't defend even if they wanted to. Instead of defending to the death and sacrificing the lives of all the people in the city, it was better to take the initiative to surrender to the enemy. Furthermore, Chapter 1520. These conspiracy theories wronged Yang Tao. He wasn't a despicable person, and he wouldn't risk the war for the sake of personal revenge. The arrival of the reinforcements was normal, but the timing of Dafang's surrender was abnormal. Uft. Yangxi was drinking tea to quench his thirst when he suddenly heard that Xia County Magistrate had secretly sent someone over to negotiate. He spat out a mouthful of tea, drenching Feng Zhen's sleeve. Feng Zhen almost jumped up from where he stood. His face was not only angry, but also full of disdain. Fu Wang saw that the two were about to start fighting again, so he smiled and stepped forward to separate them. Military foresight is amazing. That Dafang County Magistrate is indeed a cowardly, selfish person. Fu Wang smiled and flattered Feng Zhen, calming his anger at Yangxi's saliva on his sleeve. But Yangxi wasn't easy to deal with either. They sent someone over to negotiate. They might not be surrendering. Perhaps they're just pretending to surrender. Feng Zhen laughed coldly. If they had that kind of courage and unyielding character, Yang Jian wouldn't have died so tragically back then. The powers in Zhangzhou were far more complicated than outsiders could imagine. Landowning families stood in great numbers, and powerful people rose up together. Their interests had already reached a delicate balance. Who would have thought that Yang Jian would appear out of nowhere and break the balance? Some people were convinced by his heroism, but more people didn't like him. At the root of it all, it was because Yang Jian's unyielding attitude had affected the interests of Zhangzhou's landowning families. Rather than saying that Yang Jian had been poisoned by Zhao Xiao, it was more accurate to say that he had died because of the landowning family's indifference. Yang Jian was dead. The hothead who had been eyeing their cake and destroying their interests was gone. Who knew how they would celebrate in secret? Yang Tao's personality wasn't as unyielding as Yang Jian's, and his methods weren't as forceful. That was why the backlash wasn't as severe. If Yang Tao's personality was the same as his father's, Yang Tao would have been plotted against a long time ago. This group of people was born to pursue benefits. They were willing to follow whoever could bring them a prosperous future and allow their families to continue to prosper. This rule didn't just apply to the landowning families of Zhangzhou. It applied to other people as well. When Yang Tao could bring them benefits, Yang Tao was their lord. When Yang Tao could not even protect himself, this group of people began to plan for themselves. Loyalty. What was that? Those who were truly proud and unyielding were often the ones who died the earliest and most tragic deaths. Those landowning households had lived longer than a 1,000-year-old tortoise. Which one of them wasn't an expert at seeking benefits and avoiding harm? In the face of the threat and pressure of the 80,000 troops, the county magistrate of Dangfang County had long been scared out of his wits. It was expected that he would surrender. Backbone? Hee, how much is that thing worth? Just as Feng Zhen had expected, the Dangfang County magistrate had sent people over to surrender, and the messenger had been extremely flattering. Seeing this, Yangxi could not be bothered to argue anymore. Otherwise, he would be slapped in the face by Feng Zhen again. Zhangzhou was Feng Zhen's hometown, his home ground. It would be great if the people we meet along the way were all so tactful. Although Fu Wang loved to fight, he also knew that people would die in battle. His old brothers had died one by one, and now, when he found someone to drink with, it was always a new face. It would be the best if they could conquer Zhangzhou without shedding any blood. Unfortunately, this was just a daydream. Yangxi smiled and said, "General Fu, this isn't a good thing." Fu Wang asked him in surprise, "Why do you say that? Isn't it good for the enemy to surrender?" Yangxi said, "There are many people who have surrendered. Can you tell which ones are sincere, and which ones are pretending to surrender, and are waiting for a good opportunity?" If the road was filled with people who had surrendered, Yangxi would be so scared that he wouldn't be able to sleep. Fu Wang said, "What the military counselor said makes sense." County Magistrate Xia opened the city gates and surrendered without another word. He was very guilty, and so were the landowning households in the city. No one actually went to inform Yang Tao. When Yang Tao's reinforcements arrived nearby, he realized that something was wrong. He sent a few scouts disguised as refugees to scout for news. Not long after the scouts returned, they told the general that there were no signs of a siege at the city gates. But the flag on the city walls had been changed to a flag with the surname Liu. The general who led the troops knew what had happened. He was furious and cut a withered tree at the side with his sword. These despicable people! Are they trying to kill us? And then wag their tails at the new master to claim credit? The general was so angry that his chest rose and fell violently. But he couldn't care less about his anger now. He could only immediately turn around and leave with his troops. 80,000 elites were stationed in Dafang, and the level of land warfare of the soldiers under Jiang Pingji's command was well known. The general didn't want to fight against the elites with an exhausted army after a long journey. However, he was still a step too late. Fu Wang led the troops to cut off their retreat. The two armies had a scuffle in the suburbs outside Dafang City. After a fierce battle, the crows circling in the sky refused to leave for a long time. Broken limbs and wreckage were everywhere. The reinforcements sent by Yang Tao suffered heavy casualties. However, Fu Wang didn't manage to keep all of them. Nearly half of the remaining troops broke through the encirclement. It didn't take long for the news to reach Yang Tao's ears. When he understood the whole story, he was so angry that he smashed the table. I've never seen such a group of spineless cowards. The generals under his command were also furious. They wanted to rush to the county magistrate of Dafang and cut him into pieces. Yang Tao's eyes were bloodshot. He was so angry that his teeth were trembling. At the same time, he felt a deep sense of heartache. When he received the emergency report from Dafang, he immediately sent his elite troops to rush there day and night. Dafang City's walls were high and thick, so it wouldn't be a problem to defend for a day or two. Who would have thought that the county magistrate wouldn't even fart and would surrender without a word? Not only was this bastard afraid of death, but he also let countless good men die because of him. If he had no intention to fight and surrendered so easily, why did he have to call for help? The two armies hadn't even officially started fighting, but he was already siding with the enemy. How awesome! Yan Lin said. Please calm down, my lord. There's no need to get angry over such despicable people. Yang Tao panted heavily. I'm not doing it for these fickle people. I'm doing it for the soldiers who died for nothing. Yan Lin sighed in his heart. The county magistrate of Dafang is only siding with Lu Shi on the surface. I don't know how many people are secretly trying to get on her good side. The more anxious he was, the more disadvantageous it would be. Yan Lin said. Have you heard of fence-sitters? Wherever the wind blows, the person will fall to the same side. What really determines their stand is not the scenery inside or outside the walls, but the wind. They surrendered to Lu Shi for the sake of their own interests and self-preservation. Naturally, they will show their loyalty to us for the same reason. My lord, why don't you play along and let Lu Shi have a taste of his own medicine? Once she's had a taste, she'll know that not all filthy and smelly trash can be put into her mouth. Some trash can taste bad at best, but some can choke to death. Yang Tao said. Xiaoyang, you mean to send people to pretend to surrender? Chapter 1521. Yang Tao didn't understand. What do you mean? Yan Lin's eyes were cold as he said. Lu Shi's advisor Feng Zhen is from Zhengzhou's Anshan County. He was born into an aristocratic family and is very familiar with the powers in Zhengzhou. He probably knows which families are willing to join him and which families are not. Therefore, if they wanted to set up a trap, Yan Lin couldn't choose Yang Tao's people. The trick of injuring oneself to gain sympathy depended on the target. It was useless against a heartless animal like Feng Zhen. He wouldn't trust him even if he killed him. I have a good candidate. Yang Tao asked. Who? The Zhao family. Zhao Xiao's Zhao family. Years ago, Zhao Xiao caused Yang Jin's death and brought his family to seek refuge with the fake emperor Prince Changshou. Later, he followed Prince Chongqing to Nansheng and secretly ran back to Dongqing. He even became Su Bei's guest minister. He was known as the best thief and was as sly as a mudfish. Yang Tao was also a man who could distinguish between kindness and hatred. He only wanted to kill the person who killed his father, so he didn't vent his anger on the Zhao family. However, Yang Tao didn't kill anyone, but the Zhao family didn't dare to relax. They were always on tenterhooks, afraid that Yang Tao would find them to settle old scores. If that happened, they wouldn't even be able to escape. The Zhao family was the happiest when Jiang Pingji called. It was no surprise that the Zhao family would defect to the enemy. Xiaoyang means to use them as candidates to fake their surrender? Are you sure this isn't digging their own graves? Yang Tao didn't kill the other members of the Zhao family, but he had been secretly suppressing them in recent years. When he was in a bad mood, he would vent his anger on them. From a fundamental point of view, the Zhao family and Yang Tao were going in opposite directions. There was no way the Zhao family would help Yang Tao complete his plan. It was already good enough that they didn't betray Yang Tao. Yin Lin nodded, then shook his head. For now, the Zhao family is the most suitable candidate. Feng Zhen and the others won't suspect them, Yin Lin said. Whether it's the Zhao family or the other gentry families, they all have to face an awkward problem when they grow bigger. The number of family members increases, and there are many conflicts between the branches. There are even examples of blood brothers turning against each other, not to mention a big family. It's impossible for everyone to be of one mind. Yang Si and the others had thought of feigning surrender, but they had never thought that Yang Tao would place his hopes on the Zhao clan. This sword move was unconventional. It was too unconventional. Yin Lin secretly sent people to detain the target's parents, wife, and children. Since the target was unwilling to do so, he had no choice but to do it. Since the county magistrate surrendered without even fighting, and the reinforcements sent by Yang Tao were intercepted by Fu Wang and his men, the morale of Zhangzhou's people plummeted. Fu Wang led his troops to advance southward with an unstoppable momentum. It only took him a month to reap a considerable harvest. Seeing that the situation was becoming clearer and clearer, the landowning households who had been hesitant immediately switched sides. Their secret letters were also sent more frequently, and the contents were no longer vague and ambiguous. Fu Wang sneered as he finished reading. He treasured the letters one by one. These were all for his lord to read. To put it nicely, these people were very sensible, and had bet on the right person. To put it bluntly, he had no backbone and was useless. Yang Tao hadn't lost yet, but they were already singing the bad news and sending flirtatious glances to the enemy. How could his lord rest assured with people with such bad characters? For example, if his lord was unfortunately faced with a situation like Yang Tao's one day, would these despicable people jump out and kick her when she was down? Fu Wang sneered. They're not loyal once, but they'll never be loyal again. They still don't understand our lord's temperament. As the war unfolded, more and more landowning households changed sides. Some even brought their families over to seek refuge. The Zhao clan? Which Zhao clan? There were many landowning households with the same surname, and there were also a few landowning households with the surname Zhao in Zhangzhou. Yang Si glanced at it and smiled mysteriously. So it's this Zhao clan. Zhao Xiao was from the same landowning household. Yang Si even had an inexplicable ill-fated relationship with Zhao Xiao. Back then, Zhao Xiao mocked Yang Si at the Hungmen banquet for being the son of a prostitute. Yang Si immediately retorted, but he was still angry when he returned. When it came to holding a grudge, Yang Si ranked in the top 3. Not long after, his lord brought people to attack the Barbican city. Yang Si secretly concealed Zhao Xiao's whereabouts. He watched as Zhao Xiao was tortured by a few refugees until he was physically and mentally exhausted and couldn't close the door properly. Then he personally witnessed Zhao Xiao being punished with a wooden basin. Only then did he satisfactorily write off this grudge. Because of Zhao Xiao, Yang Si didn't have a good impression of the Zhao clan. Feng Zhen said, "The Zhao clan has been living in fear all these years. I'm afraid they haven't been doing well." Yang Si laughed. It'd be strange if they were doing well, right? Zhao Xiao is Yang Tao's enemy who killed his father. Now that the Zhao clan is under Yang Tao's control, they have no choice but to tuck their tails between their legs. Now that we're leading troops to attack Zhangzhou, the Zhao clan will probably be overjoyed. Look, they're hurriedly flying over. The Zhao clan was sincerely seeking refuge. Not only did they offer a lot of their family's savings, but they also gave a proof of allegiance. This proof of allegiance was the Great Universal Geographical Map of several main river basins in Zhangzhou. It also marked the distribution of Yang Tao's troops. This is really generous, but does the military advisor think it's trustworthy? Fu Wang first saw the information, but then he became suspicious. He was a little stunned that such a big pie had fallen from the sky. Yang Si asked Feng Zhen. Is the relationship between the Zhao clan and Yang Tao really like fire and water? Feng Zhen said, Yang Tao often oppresses the Zhao clan. How good do you think their relationship is? If that's the case, this great universal geographical map is real. Feng Zhen frowned. The Zhao clan's allegiance is real, but the great universal geographical map needs to be discussed. General, why don't you send someone to test them again? The results of the test were that there were no problems. Not everyone could have the great universal geographical map. Otherwise, how could it be called a military secret? If they used it as a proof of allegiance, the Zhao clan's future would be promising. Why would they present a fake map and put themselves in a difficult position? Feng Zhen said, Yang Tao doesn't tolerate the Zhao clan. If they offend the Lord again, how can they have a foothold? I'm afraid they'll want to die. After confirming the authenticity of the great universal geographical map, the wariness in everyone's hearts disappeared. They had previously drawn a map of the waters surrounding Zhangzhou after clearing out the bandits, but the mountains and rivers within the borders were still unclear. With the help of this great universal geographical map, the difficulty of taking down Zhangzhou would be greatly reduced. Fu Wang was in a good mood. Maybe we can take down Zhangzhou before the Lord forces the Nie clan to retreat. Little did they know that this was just a trap set up by Yin Lin. Most of the great universal geographical map was real. Only the small details were fake. But it was these details that were enough to affect the direction of the entire battle. Yang Tao asked his friend, Has Xiaoyang been unhappy with the Zhao clan for a long time? Yin Lin asked with his eyes. Yang Tao said, Once we lose the battle, Fu Wang and the others will find out that the great universal geographical map is fake. The Zhao clan, who presented the great universal geographical map, will probably have to bear the full responsibility. Regardless of whether the Zhao clan really betrayed them or not, they would still end up with their heads broken. Chapter 1522. Yang Tao smiled. If that's the case, the Zhaos won't be able to explain themselves no matter how many times they open their mouths. Why bother? Even though he had killed his father, Yang Tao hadn't done anything to the Zhaos over the years. At most, he had suppressed them a little, so that they wouldn't be able to rise again. The Zhao's status in Zhangzhou wasn't as high as it used to be, but at least they didn't have to worry about their lives. Now, in order to seek a better future, the Zhao family betrayed one side and sided with the other when the Willow family and the Willow family were at war. They used the war as a capital to climb the ladder to heaven and advance. Were they not afraid of climbing too high and falling from the sky, turning into meat paste? If they were unhappy with Yang Tao, they should have waited until he was defeated before throwing themselves at the enemy. To put it bluntly, their impatience was due to greed. How could the icing on the cake compare to providing timely help? Yin Lin looked down and sneered. Everyone has their own fate. If the Zhaos are destroyed, they have only themselves to blame. In troubled times, it was wrong not to pick a side, but it was also wrong to pick the wrong side. The Zhaos could only blame themselves for being short-sighted and unlucky. Whether it was Jiang Pingji or the other nobles, they all hated fickle and treacherous people from the bottom of their hearts. Yin Lin had used Jiang Pingji's hands to kill the Zhaos. That was the end they deserved. Yang Tao and Yin Lin watched the Zhao's fate coldly, but the Zhaos didn't think so. Once Yang Tao is destroyed, we can finally put down the knife on our necks. Ever since Yang Tao had risen again, the Zhaos had been trembling with fear, afraid that he would kill them one day. Now that they sided with Jiang Pingji and presented the universal geographical map, they still had to worry about the future of the Zhaos. When the rewards were given after the war, the Zhaos would also be ranked. They might not be able to cover the sky with one hand in Zhangzhou, but they would at least be a big shot. Yang Tao has a strong foundation in Zhangzhou. The troops under his command are the elite navy left by Yang Jian. Leader, do you think they? The advisor looked worried and said, Lu Shi's troops are strong, but fighting on land and on water can't be compared. Don't worry about that. The leader of the Zhao clan was very confident in Jiang Pingji. According to the spies that Zhao family had planted in the water stockade, and then incorporated into the army, the navy under Jiang Pingji's command was in good spirits. One could not tell that they were cowardly in the face of the great river in the north. If it was a water battle, even if their combat strength was inferior to Yang Tao's, they could still win by relying on numbers. Now that they had presented the great universal geographical map, their chances of winning had increased by at least 30%. Zhao Shi and the others were happily dreaming, unaware that a disaster had already descended. A few days later, a few pieces of bad news reached Feng Zhen and the others. After Feng Zhen and Yang Si had a discussion, they decided to send 30,000 naval troops in 3 different directions. They would go downstream and attack 3 key locations in Jiangzhou. They were going to catch the enemy off guard. Unexpectedly, the report of victory did not come back. Instead, it was news that the navy had been ambushed by the enemy, and the casualties were unclear. Enemy surprise attack? Feng Zhen's hand trembled, and the brush in his hand fell onto the table. The ink stained the table black. He quickly walked to the sand table and glanced at the place where his army had been ambushed. No matter how he analyzed it, there could not be an ambush in the waters. The waters were wide, and the field of vision was clear. Where would the enemy have come from to ambush them? Could it be that they had grown wings and descended from the sky? But their battle report could not be wrong. Then, this meant that there was a problem with their intelligence. A possibility popped up in his mind. The veins on his forehead bulged with his anger. Quickly tell me the details. Feng Zhen pinched the corner of the sand table with one hand. His fingers turned white from using too much force. The messenger saw that Feng Zhen was really angry and did not dare to delay. He spoke twice as fast. Feng Zhen stared at the great universal geographical map that Zhao Shi had presented. 2 clusters of flames ignited in his eyes, as if he wanted to burn a hole in the map. Send reinforcements. If they can make it in time, order the Vanguard Navy to turn back. This was the disadvantage of outdated communication. If they could communicate in real time, the Vanguard Navy could send news back when they realized something was wrong. Then, Feng Zhen could order adjustments to the battle order to reduce unnecessary casualties and losses. It was too late to order reinforcements and retreat now. Report. The first messenger had just left when another soldier came running with an urgent report from the front lines. Feng Zhen had already expected this. He ordered people to take Zhao Shi into custody and had the messenger read out the urgent report. There were many waters in Jiangzhou. Some of the waters looked very calm, but under the water, there were undercurrents and reefs everywhere. If the navy at the helm was not careful, it could easily cause the ship to hit the reefs and sink. Once in the water, how could they fight? The navy was quite alert. When they realized that something was wrong underwater, they immediately sent people back to report. But they did not dare to delay military orders, so they chose a compromise. They had the army stop for half a day and sent dozens of soldiers on small boats to check out the situation in the waters. After investigating for an hour, they suddenly realized that the waters were very dangerous. The small boats were fine, but the battleships that could carry hundreds of people had a deep draft. If they sailed over, they would most likely hit the reefs and sink. The commander of the navy discovered the problem and immediately realized that the intelligence given by his superiors was wrong. There was something fishy going on, so he hurriedly prepared to return. The other navy had bad luck. They ran into the enemy's main force, which was waiting for them. The battle was extremely fierce. Feng Zhen was not the only one who was angry. Yin Lin and the others did not look happy either. The tent was quiet. No one dared to even breathe. They could not help but look at the culprit. Yin Lin was sitting on the right side of Yang Tao. The bamboo report in his hand had been crushed by him. He did not even feel the thorns piercing into his skin. Yang Tao and Yin Lin had grown up together. He knew what it was like to be angry, so he secretly shivered. Xiaoyang, this battle is not without gains. Yang Tao wanted to plead for his generals, but his friend's aura was too oppressive. The more he spoke, the weaker he became. He only dared to speak in a low voice. According to Yin Lin's plan, they would definitely take down Jiang Pingji's 30,000 navy and make them all ghosts on the river. When it came to actual action, the result was far less than expected. Not only was the enemy's operation beyond their expectations, but the ability of their own generals was also disappointing. As mentioned earlier, Feng Zhen planned to take advantage of the upper class. He sent the elites of the three armies downstream to attack the target as fast as possible. There were 3 groups of elites, but only 2 of them actually fought. The third group of enemies realized that something was wrong and planned to retreat. What made Yanlin's heart ache was that the ambushing troops did not move at all. They did not try to stop the enemy. They just watched as the enemy retreated. Were they pigs? Who was the leader of the ambushing troops? Yanlin glanced at the name. Not only was his heart aching, but his head was also hurting. Chapter 1523. He was supposed to spend the rest of his life at home, but because of his disappointing children, he had to put on his armor again for the sake of his descendants. He begged Yang Tao to give him a chance to fight. Yang Tao was a sentimental man. The old man was not only Yang Jian's martial arts master when he was young, but he had also protected Yang Jian from many fatal wounds. He had been at his beck and call for more than 20 years. Yang Tao couldn't refuse, so he agreed. It was a pity that the old man was too old. He often acted like an old man, and used his old friendship with Yang Jian to pressure people. Yang Tao had a good temper, so he didn't take it to heart. The old man loved to drink when he was young, but he knew his limits and didn't dare to break military discipline. Yang Tao knew this. He didn't think it was a big deal that the old man liked to drink, as long as he could control his liquor at critical moments. But now things were different. Perhaps it was because he had been living at home for a few years that his temper had become arrogant. He was stupid and willful. It was such an important setup, but not only did he not raise his guard, he even got drunk in front of the formation. After the enemy took the initiative to retreat, the group of soldiers looked at each other in confusion. They did not know what to do, and did not dare to act on their own without the general's order. The vice commander could only call for the old man. In the end, he got angry and splashed a bucket of water on the old man to wake him up. It was too late. They chased after the enemy, but the enemy's warships were already far away. They couldn't catch up. Therefore, other than a few warships that sank at the beginning, they didn't suffer any other losses. The other 2 groups of navy were ambushed along the way and were caught unprepared. They encountered battles along the way, and the enemy outnumbered them by a factor of 2. The 2 groups of navy lost more than 10,000 warships and hundreds of warships. It wasn't a bad result, but everyone could see that according to Yanlin's calculations, the enemy's losses were even greater. If they had performed well, they could have wiped out 20,000 of the enemy's navy, but they let 10,000 of them escape. What a joke! Opportunities on the battlefield were fleeting. If they missed this opportunity, they didn't know when they would get another. Yanlin wasn't the kind of person to lose his temper, nor would he blame an innocent general. He calmed down and asked about the situation at the front. After a while he noticed a fatal problem. Whether it was the ambush group or the ones that were engaged in head-on battles, the enemy had to rely on brute force to break through. Those who dared to fight in the water so recklessly could only rely on one thing: warships. The result of the investigation was as Yanlin had expected. The enemy's warship was indeed unique. When the 2 ships collided, the enemy's ship didn't shake much, but Yanlin's ship reacted violently. If there were a few more collisions, the enemy's warship would still be able to hold on, but their own warship would already be damaged and flooded. Everyone listened to this analysis, and the previous information surfaced in their minds. Mountain Ghost grants shipbuilding divine art. They looked at each other in dismay, silently communicating with their eyes. Aren't they all fake? Someone finally broke the silence. How can there be mountain ghosts in this world? They were in awe of ghosts and gods, but that didn't mean they believed in their existence. There are no mountain ghosts, but the warships they built do have an advantage in water battles. Because of the sturdiness of the warship, it was able to break through their blockade and ambush by brute force. It could only watch helplessly as half of the fatty meat flew away. This battle could not be said to be a great victory. In order to kill more than 10,000 enemies, they had also paid the price of warships and casualties. Even though it wasn't as tragic as Jiangpingji's, Yang Tao didn't have much money at the moment. He didn't have many supplies, so he would feel the pain if he lost more. Someone couldn't help but mutter, "Look at their warships. I wonder when Lu Shi started plotting against Zhangzhou." Yin Lin sneered. When she was just a county magistrate. Who would have thought that Qi Kuang, whom Jiang Pingji borrowed during the alliance meeting at Huangshui, would help her train such a tough navy? He shouldn't have let her borrow him back then. Thinking of this, Yin Lin resisted the urge to get even with his friends. Jiang Pingji wanted to borrow Qi Kuang, but Yang Tao had foolishly agreed. Who would have thought that they would raise a tiger in their bosom? After everyone left, Qian Su secretly gave a letter of information to Yang Tao. Yin Lin was beside him. "What's this?" Qian Su said. "The news came back 2 days ago. Lu Shi has put a lot of pressure on the Nie family." Yang Tao opened it curiously and frowned. After reading it, he passed it to his friend, Yin Lin. "T," Yin Lin said. "How dare they send back such absurd news?" The letter said that hundreds of arrows were stopped in mid-air by the golden light, and couldn't hurt Jiang Pingji. Yang Tao said, "Fortunately this news didn't spread. Otherwise, it would prove that Mountain Ghost helped Lu Shi." Qian Su said, "It was also because of this concern that I secretly hid this letter of intelligence. If Lu Shi is truly blessed by the heavens, this battle will be hard to win. The Nie family has such a strong military force and Nie Liang is so ruthless. But they were defeated by Lu Shi. This is a ready-made example. Because there were many illiterates, there were also many ignorant people. They were the easiest people to provoke and deceive." Yin Lin said, "I don't think we can hide it for long. Fortunately, our army has just won a small battle. It should be able to eliminate the influence of the rumors. If he was blessed by the heavens, how could he lose to a mortal?" Qian Su also laughed. "This battle came in time. Otherwise, our army would be very passive." Yin Lin couldn't laugh. He was in charge of the entire army, and knew the current situation of his army. After all, the battle at Nanxing had consumed too much energy. Before they could recover, they had to fight Jiang Pingji again. They were weak. This news couldn't be spread to prevent the stability of the army from being affected. Yang Tao's camp was half happy and half worried. Feng Zhen's camp was full of thunder and lightning. It looked like a fellow cultivator had passed the tribulation and ascended. The people of the Zhao family were detained. The leader of the Zhao family, who had presented the universal geographical map, was brought to the front of the crowd. The leader looked confused. "You presented a fake map and killed tens of thousands of my soldiers. You deserve to die, you villain." Fu Wang gritted his teeth. He unsheathed his sword and placed it across the leader's neck, drawing a thin red line. The leader of the Zhao family was scared out of his wits. He hurriedly said, "General, what do you mean? Why are you accusing me?" Feng Zhen threw the universal geographical map on the leader's face. His expression was extremely cold. "This is the map you presented." When had the leader of the Zhao family ever been humiliated like this? However, with the enemy's sword on his neck, he could only swallow his anger for the sake of his life. He opened the universal geographical map with trembling hands and looked at it carefully. This is indeed the universal geographical map I presented. The map is fake," Yang Si sneered. Yang Si sneered and said, "TSK, you colluded with Yang Tao to use fake pictures to harm people. What a loyal dog." The Zhao family and Yang Tao hated each other so much. How could they let bygones be bygones? Chapter 1524. Fake? How could the universal geographical map be fake? Someone must be trying to frame us. The Zhao clan leader's heart skipped a beat. All the blood drained from his face, leaving behind a frighteningly pale face. His eyes were as big as goldfish. He wasn't stupid. He knew what would happen to the Zhao clan if the universal geographical map was fake. Extermination would be considered a light punishment. Feng Zhen only smiled coldly. Fu Wang's eyes were full of murderous intent, and the Zhao clan leader didn't dare look him in the eye. He was so flustered that he didn't know where to put his hands. He could only seize the opportunity to defend himself. Yang Tao has suppressed the Zhao clan many times. Because of his power, we could only swallow our anger and give in again and again. We've been looking forward to it for a long time, and finally, The Duke of Lanting has graced us with his presence. The entire Zhao clan is overjoyed. We've finally escaped from the tiger's mouth. Why would we help Yang Tao? Yang Si asked him. The universal geographical map was presented by you, wasn't it? The Zhao clan leader nodded with some hesitation. Yes. This fake universal geographical map caused our deployment to go wrong. We fell into the enemy's trap and lost tens of thousands of elite soldiers, wasn't it? The universal geographical map must have been replaced. The map presented by the Zhao clan is definitely not a problem. The Zhao clan leader felt even more hopeless after hearing this. He stammered. The Zhao clan is truly loyal to Duke Lanting. I hope that the general and the military counselor will investigate carefully and prove our innocence. Yang Si smiled coldly. The fake map was presented by the Zhao clan. Of course, you have to bear the responsibility. Even if the universal geographical map was really replaced, you have failed in your duties. The lives of your entire clan won't be enough. When the Zhao clan leader heard this, he immediately understood Yang Si's plan. His heart went cold, as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Why are you talking so much nonsense with him, military counselor? Lock up all his clansmen and investigate them one by one. Fu Wang had never been a good-tempered person. They had lost tens of thousands of sailors in one go. If his lord investigated, he would take the blame. Just thinking about it made him grit his teeth in hatred. He couldn't help but twist the Zhao clan leader's head off with his bare hands. If it's a fake surrender, they'll all be turned to dust. No matter how much the leader of the Zhao clan cried out, he couldn't change the fate of his entire clan being imprisoned. After careful investigation, Feng Zhen and the others had locked onto a certain member of the Zhao clan as a suspect. On the eve of the incident, the man had packed his belongings and was ready to escape. However, his luck was a little bad. Halfway through his escape, he was stopped by his pursuers at a certain pier and was tied up and brought back. Although this person was from a branch family, he was doing quite well. He was usually dressed in gold and silver. So when had he ever been treated like this? Tell me the truth, and I might leave you with a whole corpse. Feng Zhen had been too confident. He had played with eagles all his life, but he had almost been pecked blind by an eagle. This time, he had lost tens of thousands of elite sailors. It was a painful lesson, but it wasn't to the point where his bones were broken. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to absolve himself of the blame, even if he died 10,000 times. Why did you capture me? Then why did you pack your bags and flee? Feng Zhen countered. The Zhao clan has been implicated because of you, and their extinction is imminent. As a member of the Zhao clan, you will naturally share blessings and misfortunes, and follow them to the Yellow Springs. Tell me, why did I capture you? The man's hands were tied behind his back with hemp rope. He knelt on the ground, his head drooping to his chest, not daring to raise his head. What, you have nothing to say? Feng Zhen laughed coldly and confidently. Did you swap this fake great universal geographical map? The man's body trembled faintly, and his Adam's apple squirmed as he swallowed. Feng Zhen continued. Your parents, wife and child. You said they were ambushed and killed by the pirates, but in reality, they were detained by Yang Tao, weren't they? Since you already know, why bother asking? The man saw that Feng Zhen had even guessed this, so he simply threw caution to the wind and admitted to all his crimes. This was all my doing. I will take responsibility for my actions alone, and it has nothing to do with the clan. Feng Zhen laughed. He didn't know whether to call the man stupid or smart. You say this to absolve the clan, but do you think it's possible? The man countered. What? Is the Duke of Lanting someone who can't tell right from wrong, and would actually implicate the entire clan for one person's crimes? He insisted that he was the one who did it. If Jiang Pingji held the entire clan responsible, wouldn't that be killing the innocent? However, Feng Zhen wasn't a simple person. How could he let the man beat around the bush with just a few words? If I can kill the entire clan to prevent this from happening again, why not? Feng Zhen laughed coldly. The Zhao family clearly had the intention of rebelling, but they pushed all the blame onto you. Did they really think that they could escape the fate of extinction by doing so? In their dreams. After hearing this, the man's expression revealed his disbelief. Your wife, child, and parents are in Yang Tao's hands, right? Feng Zhen raised his hand and pinched the man's chin, forcing him to look up at him. His seemingly thin hand was extremely strong, and he easily left several purple fingerprints on the man's face. Remember to walk slowly on the road to the underworld and wait for them. What do you mean? What do I mean? The day we conquer Zhangzhou and capture Yangtao is the day your family goes to the underworld to find you. Feng Zhen suppressed the urge to strangle the man and laughed coldly. If we don't make the entire Zhao family pay with their lives, how will the tens of thousands of souls who drowned in the river rest in peace? Casualties were inevitable in a battle between two armies, but the deaths had to be worthwhile. Feng Zhen wouldn't blame Yan Lin, who came up with this evil plan, because this was a normal battle between two armies. Conspiracies and overt plots were normal. You could plot against others and others could plot against you. It was just a matter of who was more skilled. However, he couldn't tolerate the villains involved. The Zhao family brought their entire clan to seek refuge, but they presented the fake map. They deserved to die. Because they had lost a battle, Yang Tao's side was full of vigor. The gentry who had been throwing flirtatious glances at Jiang Pingji didn't make a move again. The secret report Jiang Pingji received was about the Zhao family. These gentry in Zhangzhou, are they all itching for a beating? The more he looked, the angrier he became, especially when he saw the number of casualties on his side. His heart burned with anger. Do they really think the feudal lords are like radishes and cabbages in the market that they can pick and choose? Yangtao was weak, so the gentry in Zhangzhou kept throwing flirtatious glances at Jiang Pingji. Their attitudes were ambiguous. Yangtao had won a great victory, so the gentry's stance changed again. The gentry who had pledged their allegiance to Jiang Pingji were also restless. When had she ever been so picky? Did they really think Jiang Pingji was easy to talk to? Regarding the Zhao family, Jiang Pingji had the same thoughts as Feng Zhen and the others. If she allowed this incident to set a precedent, the gentry who pledged their allegiance to her in the future would pull out some petty tricks and drag one of their clansmen out to take the blame. Her prestige and reputation as a feudal lord would be swept away. How could she defend herself? Qiguan Rang said, "This is what Yang Tao wanted." Indeed, Yang Tao had taken Jiang Pingji's sword and killed the entire Zhao family. He had avenged his father's last bit, and his reputation hadn't been damaged. Chapter 1525. Jiang Pingji knew that Yang Tao would clap his hands and celebrate if she killed Zhao Shi, but she still wanted to kill her. She wanted to use this move to make the aristocrats of Zhangzhou think about it carefully. She also wanted them to understand that the fight for the feudal lords of the world was not something they could pick and choose at will. They could jump ship, but they had to know their place. If they dared to be disloyal, then they couldn't blame the god-slaying sword in her hand. I hate betrayal the most. She was actually very easy to talk to as long as they didn't cross her line. Once he stepped on it, there would be nothing left to say. Apart from that, there was also the punishment for Feng Zhen's mistake. She planned to settle the score after the war. Yan Lin is not to be underestimated, but Feng Zisha really underestimated him. Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci walked out and talked about what had happened in a low voice. Everyone could tell that Jiang Pingji wanted to give Feng Zhen a chance. She didn't want to punish him severely. Of course, she couldn't punish him severely, because Feng Zhen wasn't the only one to blame. I agree with the first part, but I disagree with the second part. Wei Ci smiled. Yan Lin helped the reckless Yang Tao get to where he is today. He must have some skills. It's not right to say that Zisha underestimated him. If Wenzheng was Zisha, would you have fallen into his trap? Wei Ci knew that Qiguan Rang's temperament was very similar to his lord's. They didn't use people they didn't trust. No matter how one looked at it, it was reasonable for Zhao Shi to surrender. No one would believe that Zhao Shi, who had a grudge against Yang Tao, would help Yang Tao set someone up. Therefore, after accepting Zhao Shi, even if he had doubts about the universal geographical map, he had to use it. As long as he used the map, Yan Lin's plan would be half successful. The other half would depend on the outcome of the battle. Based on the fake map, Yan Lin had predicted the enemy's layout in advance. He had chosen the right 3 ambushes. It showed how difficult Yan Lin was to deal with. Even with Wei Si's experience from his previous life, he wouldn't be able to win against Yin Lin. Qiguan Rang frowned and said gloomily, "It's hard to say. I'll most likely fall into his trap." Yin Lin's plan was not something that could be avoided by a cautious and suspicious person. Wei Si was not surprised by Qiguan Rang's answer. Based on what happened in her past life, Qiguan Rang was the one who fought Yin Lin, not Feng Zhen. He even suffered a few losses at Yin Lin's hands. Although they won the battle, it was not an easy victory. If Qiguan Rang had not lured Yang Tao into the trap of capturing Yin Lin, Yang Tao, who was as tough as a cockroach, would still have been alive and kicking for months. The two armies would have suffered even more losses. Of course, it wasn't that Qiguan Rang was worse than Yin Lin. Even though Qiguan Rang's ascension to the top of the scholar roll of the Golden Scale Pavilion in his previous life was partly due to political factors, it was mostly due to his personal strength. Scholars all had their own specialties. It would be difficult to compete with each other. Yin Lin had the home advantage. Whether it was Qiguan Rang or Feng Zhen, it was expected that they would suffer losses at his hands. The only difference was whether the losses were greater or lesser. Tao was Yin Si. Were to kill 10,000 elite Navy soldiers were Yanzu. Yang said. To say. Yang said Yang. Yang S. Yang, S. Wei Yang's Yang Yang. Wei Si didn't know much about the war because he hadn't experienced it himself. He only knew about the armaments and casualties of the two armies. This is a long war. Winning or losing doesn't mean anything. Wei Si smiled. When Zheng, you have some confidence in Zisher. He may not be serious, but he's reliable at critical moments. Qiguan Rang snorted coldly, declining to comment. Hey, isn't that Dalong from the Feng family? Why are you standing there in a daze? With his sharp eyes, Wei Si saw Feng Yi standing outside his tent waiting for someone, and called out to her with a smile. Feng Yi bowed to Wei Si and Qiguan Rang. Greetings, uncles. Wei Si lifted the curtain and smiled. It's still hot outside. Come in and have a seat. Feng Yi nodded. Qiguan Rang asked, Are you here about your father? Feng Yi said, Yes. I'm feeling uneasy. After hesitating for a long time, I decided to come and see what you're up to. You're very honest. If it was your father, he'd probably try to deceive you. Qiguan Rang's usually stiff face revealed an unnatural smile. You don't have to worry about this. My lord doesn't mean to punish me. When your father returns in triumph, I'll make amends for my mistakes. With uncle's words, I'm relieved. Feng Yi heaved a sigh of relief, and immediately revealed an embarrassed blush. He explained in a slightly awkward manner. Just now, I received a letter from my mother. I was just worried that if this matter reached home, she would be worried. So that was the case. Wei Si was amused. No wonder the steady Feng Yi would come to see what he was up to. Seeing Feng Yi leave, Qiguan Rang said, Although they're mother and son, they have a good relationship. I really don't know how this Feng Longzi did it. He's useless and unsteady, but his wife is smart and capable. His son is also a good seedling. It's enviable. Wei Si said sourly. Maybe he'll have better seedlings in the future. Feng Yu hee. He should have eliminated this child when he was selecting the study companions of the crown prince. Why was the pig in Feng Zhen's house, eyeing the good cabbages in other people's courtyards? Qiguan Rang asked faintly. Can Feng Longzi still make it? Feng Zhen drank alcohol and took hanchi powder. Although he quit under the Lord's tyranny, could his seed still survive? Wei Si revealed an indescribable expression. What was the point of asking him if Feng Zhen could make it? However, he really did know. This was a pain in the ass. Wei Si didn't struggle for too long. Soon, he was called away by the messenger who ran over. My lord is busy. Qiguan Rang revealed a complicated expression after hearing this. He stretched out his hand towards Wei Si, indicating that he should go. He didn't need to be called. The messenger said again, My lord has summoned both military counselors. Qiguan Rang responded with an "Oh." There was no awkwardness on his expressionless face. He smoothed out the folds of his sleeves. The two of them went to the commander's tent together. What's going on now? Qiguan Rang was curious. Wei Si didn't know either. He only said, You'll know when you get there. Just like the two of them. Everyone returned to their respective tents. They hadn't even sat down when they were called over by their lord. They came a few times a day. Their legs were so thin that they could walk. The Nia army seems to have the intention of withdrawing. Everyone had just arrived when Jiang Pingji said such a sentence. Everyone was collectively dumbfounded. Withdrawing? The Nia army? It couldn't be. They refused to withdraw even when Nie Liang knelt down. Why would they withdraw now? Wei Xi frowned and said, "Could it be that there's a problem at the rear?" Wei Xi had also heard of the trivial matters of the Nie family. When Nie Liang was still alive, they still knew to be cautious. Now that Nie Liang was dying of illness and Nie Qing was in a hurry to take over, how would Nie Liang's uncles be willing to see a grandson defecate on their heads? Chapter 1526. Everyone looked at each other and fell into deep thought. Qiguan Rang asked, "Apart from that, did the Nia army make any other moves?" Jiang Pingji said, "I just received intelligence from the scouts at the front line that the Nia army is indeed slowly withdrawing. The defense is extremely tight. If the scouts weren't capable and the horses weren't fast, I'm afraid they wouldn't have made it back. We sent out 5 teams of scouts today, but only 4 returned. As a mobile unit to investigate the enemy's situation and counter reconnaissance, the importance of the scouts was undeniable. The scouts under Jiang Pingji's tent were special forces, who had undergone special training. Many reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance techniques were taught by Jiang Pingji in a booklet. Scouting the terrain, drinking water, and even drawing topographical maps were not a problem. Their mastery of combat belonged to the group of people at the peak of the military camp. To facilitate the scouts' work, Jiang Pingji equipped them with horses of the northern borderline. The harness was also specially made. Not only were they fast, but they also had strong endurance and explosive power. They had an advantage in mobility. They could escape immediately if they encountered a large group of enemies and save their lives. Under such circumstances, the scouts suffered such heavy casualties. It could only mean one thing. The enemy was secretly making a big move. Qiguan Rang asked again, "Is there any news from Zhongzhou?" Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and said, "The 2 places are far apart. By the time the news arrives, the Nia army would have withdrawn long ago." Once again, she could not help but complain about the backward means of communication in this world. At the same time, she missed the technology that allowed people to communicate across galaxies in her previous life. Indeed, technology changed life and the form of war. If she was given a mecha now, she could ascend to the throne in a short while. Under the circumstances of insufficient information, they could only use limited clues to determine the true situation of the enemy. Sun Wen frowned and said, "Nie Liang was quite capable. He could suppress a few uncles in the Nie family when he was alive. However, his death was too sudden. He didn't have time to give instructions." A group of old officials hastily pushed Nie Liang's son, Nie Qing, to the throne. Nie Qing is gentle and kind. I'm afraid he won't be able to suppress the demons and monsters of the Nie family. Nie Qing only has a few thousand troops with him. If there's a mutiny in the Nie family, what Sun Wen said was exactly what Wei Xi and Qiguan Rang were thinking. Nie Liang died suddenly. There was no time to pave the way for his son, Nie Qing, to pave the way for his son. If there was a mutiny in the Nie family to seize power, and Nie Qing was in danger, it would not be difficult to explain Wei Xi's anxiousness and retreat secretly. However, was that really the case? Jiang Pingji knitted her brows tightly, as if she was going through a difficult decision. The salted fishes also learned to think. After thinking about it, they still chose to cheer for Wei Xi and the rest. Xingyu and Miao Miao. Salted Fish doesn't need to use his brain to watch the live stream. He just needs to learn how to cheer for the military counselor. Shui Yuexiang. From the current clues, it seems that there is something wrong with the Nie family. The streamer can't just let the tiger return to the mountain and let Wei Dan and the others retreat, right? If they left, then so be it. If they turned around and went back to pacify the situation in the country, then the host's battle would have been in vain. Adhering to the principle of take your life while you're down, the streamer should send troops to chase after the Nie clan's army so that they can't take care of both the front and the back. More than 200,000 troops were held back by Jiang Pingji. Nie Qing died in the Nie family's internal strife, without any support. This plot was simply wonderful. I'm not a bar spirit. No, I don't think it's that simple. What if this was a trap to lure the tiger away from the mountain? The host had sent troops out of the pass to chase after the enemy, but the enemy had taken a detour to attack Zhanjiang Pass. If so, wouldn't the streamer be in a passive position? I'm not a bar spirit. However, according to the current clues, it's obvious that the Nie clan is in internal strife and Nie Qing is in danger. Is the streamer going to miss this opportunity and watch the enemy swagger away? Letting the tiger return to the mountain will cause endless trouble in the future. Nie Liang led more than 200,000 troops to fight the war. Jiang Pingji led troops to guard the pass. How much manpower, material, and financial resources did she expend? If the enemy left just like that, they would come back every few days for a stroll. Wouldn't the streamer's finances collapse? Jiang Pingji closed her eyes and didn't look at the bullet screen. She was deep in thought. After a while, she heard hurried footsteps coming from outside the tent. Report, the enemy has sent a letter of challenge. They've asked us to fight in 3 days. The messenger handed the letter of challenge that Wei Dan had personally written to Wei Ci, who then passed it to Jiang Pingji. She opened the tactical manual and took a look. Her right eyebrow was raised, and there seemed to be a flash of light in her eyes. Regardless of whether it was the emperor in the previous life, or the lord in this life, this expression meant one thing. She was angry. You're really petty. You wrote a letter of challenge, and you don't forget to curse. Are you trying to bully me because I'm illiterate? Jiang Pingji muttered, and resisted the urge to crumple the letter of challenge into a ball. Did I kill Wei Zishuan's wife or dig up his family's ancestral grave? At most, she angered Wei Dan's lord to death and abducted his younger brother. It wasn't a big grudge. Was there a need to curse so fiercely? Wei Ci knew what was written in the letter of challenge. His elder brother usually looked gentle, elegant, dignified and polite, but he was quite vicious in his cursing. He remembered that in the previous life, he had written an elegy in front of Nie Liang's mourning hall. The first half of the elegy praised Nie Liang to the heavens. In the second half, he mocked and insulted the villain who poisoned him. He cursed the person who poisoned him from head to toe, from his parents to his deceased ancestors. Wei Ci didn't know who poisoned him, but he later heard that Nie Liang's 2 uncles had fainted in front of the mourning hall. Qiguan Rang took a look at the contents of the letter of challenge. There weren't many real words of challenge. The rest were sarcastic and sarcastic greetings. Of course, the words of a scholar wouldn't be so vulgar, not to mention that this was a letter of challenge. But it was infuriating enough. Qiguan Rang said calmly, "He's just someone who likes to flaunt his eloquence. My lord, you don't have to be angry with him." Jiang Pingji said, "How am I such a petty person?" No matter how harsh a scholar's cursing was, it was just that. When Jiang Pingji had just started streaming, the insults from the haters in the streaming room were spectacular. She could even ignore the vulgar insults that carried the organs of her parents and ancestors, not to mention those of Wei Dan's level. In comparison, she was more concerned about Wei Dan's purpose of challenging her. The scout had just sent the news back, and Wei Dan had written a letter of challenge. No one would believe that he didn't have any ulterior motives. Everyone was obviously thinking the same thing as Jiang Pingji. Was Wei Dan's letter of challenge an invitation, or was he trying to cover it up? Jiang Pingji tapped her fingers on the brand new bronze table. She frowned slightly. The previous table had been destroyed and melted down by her merciless abuse. Qin Gong said, "This lowly general is willing to fight." Zhanjiang Pass wasn't the Nie family's backyard. She could come and go as she pleased. She had to catch up with him and beat him up. Chapter 1527. There is no movement from Lu Shi's side. Did he see through our plan? Fan Chen was very panicked, but Wei Yong was not in a hurry. He could only suppress his anxiety. How did she see through it? Wei Yong's eyebrows did not even rise as he sneered. Other than a few trusted generals who participated in the battle, no one else knows about this. They all think that the Nie family is in chaos, and the young master is in trouble. In this kind of situation, if Lu Shi can escape. Wei Yong paused suspiciously for a moment, disdain appearing in the depths of his eyes. Then, this is probably fate. You never believed in this. Fan Chun and Wei Yong had a good relationship, and had a certain understanding of the latter. Ever since the previous master Nie Liang died of illness, Wei Yong had changed. Fan Chun could not say exactly what had changed, but it was definitely not a good change. Fan Chun expressed his understanding of this. In the mortal world, boring bodies were everywhere, and interesting souls were 1 in 10,000. How rare was it to meet someone who understood him? After the previous master Nie Liang died of illness, while Wei Yong had not reached the level of broken zither and broken string, he had been somewhat disheartened. If the previous master had not entrusted his son Nie Qing to Wei Yong before he died, Wei Yong would have wanted to retire. Fan Chun was not making this up. Just from how Wei Yong addressed Nie Qing and Nie Liang he could tell. Everyone had changed to address Nie Qing as Lord. Only Wei Yong stubbornly called him young master. He was clearly unwilling to accept the reality of Nie Liang's death. If Nie Qing was not Wei Yong's son-in-law and student, and the two were like father and son, just this address would have thoroughly offended Nie Qing. The old master had died of illness and been buried, but the old subject was still unwilling to accept reality. Where did Wei Yong plan to place the new master? No matter how broad-minded a person, once they reached this position, Nie Qing could not completely ignore it. Even if it was just a little dissatisfaction, over time, it would be enough to destroy the friendship between Nie Qing and Wei Yong. Thinking of this, Fan Chun reminded in a low voice to prevent Wei Yong from stepping on a landmine in the future. The previous master has passed away for a long time, and Zi Shun is a reasonable person. No matter how good your relationship with the present lord, you are not biological father and son. The way you address me, you should change it. Don't embarrass the lord. Out of the corner of his eyes, Wei Yong glanced at the orange afterglow on the horizon. His lips were tightly pursed, and he seemed a little stubborn. Fan Chun said, "The previous lord has already left. By doing this, other than making others look at the lord differently and suspect that the lord's position was not obtained through proper means, there is no other meaning. If someone uses this to make a big deal out of it, not only will Her Highness be passive, but you won't be able to get anything out of it either." Wei Yin said, "My lord hasn't really left yet." Fan Chun's heart jumped. The previous master wasn't dead? But Wei Yong added, "The scheme he set up before his death hasn't ended. How can you say that he's gone? Next time, speak more swiftly and finish it in one breath." Fan Chun nearly choked on his words as he grumbled, "You almost scared me to death." Wei Yong said calmly, "When this matter is over, Yong will personally apologize to the young master." Fan Chun laughed. "You are still so stubborn." On the other hand, Jiang Pingji had investigated more evidence that the Nye camp was preparing to withdraw its troops. Although the camp was still there, and the patrolling troops were normal, the scouts secretly discovered that these patrolling soldiers appeared very frequently. A certain soldier with a scar on his face appeared 3 times in a short period of an hour. Obviously, the enemy wanted to use this to create the illusion that there were sufficient soldiers in the camp to cover up the fact that they were secretly withdrawing their troops. Qiguan Rang said, "In that case, Wei Yong's letter of challenge is also trying to cover it up. If they really waited for the agreed time to send out the troops, perhaps the enemy's camp would have already been emptied, and they would have directly stood them up." Bai Ning stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Time waits for no man. My lord, please make a decision soon. If she hesitated any longer, they would be completely exposed." Jiang Pingji closed her eyes and pondered. She was still hesitant, and did not immediately give the order to send out the troops. Given Jiang Pingji's overly decisive character, this was extremely rare. Qiguan Rang asked her, "My lord, do you suspect that something is wrong?" "I can't put my feelings into words. I just feel that it's too smooth, and it's somewhat surreal," Jiang Pingji said. The Nye clan mightily brought more than 200,000 troops to attack Zhangjiang Pass, but now they have to flee pathetically because of the internal strife. "I always feel that it's very dramatic." Jiang Pingji thought for a long time, before she found such a word to describe the current situation. The Nye clan had really attacked Zhangjiang Pass a few times, and Jiang Pingji had successfully stopped them. In the end, neither side gained any benefits. Jiang Pingji's side suffered great losses, but the Nye clan's side suffered little. Nye Liang had already folded in. Qiguan Rang said, "The battlefield is like this. Opportunities are fleeting. The Nye clan doesn't have the upper hand, and there's internal strife. It's reasonable for them to withdraw their troops." That's true. Jiang Pingji no longer hesitated. She successively gave several orders, and the generals stepped forward one by one. The tent was filled with a tense atmosphere of impending war. According to the scouts' investigation, the Nye camp's army had unusual movements in the middle of the night. It was calm during the day, so they most likely took advantage of the cover of the night to retreat in batches. Jiang Pingji set the timing for the battle at midnight to attack and pursue the enemy at night. Night fell quietly. On the other side, the General Qin Gong polished the weapons in his hands over and over again until they were shiny. The war horses were also fed with horse fodder. Bai Ning laughed and teased Qin Gong. "You don't look like you're going to war. You look more like a handsome man meeting a beautiful woman in the middle of the night." Qin Gong was considered young among the people, but Bai Ning did not take advantage of his seniority. Instead, he treated him as an equal, so they had a good relationship. "General Bai, what are you talking about?" Qin Gong blushed. "I already have someone I like. It's easy to cause misunderstandings by saying these things." Bai Ning laughed. "She's not here. No matter how much I joke, she won't hear it." Qin Gong said seriously, "Even so, if I echo General Bai's words, it'll be too frivolous for her." Bai Ning curled his lips and said, "Fine, another poppet ear." Qin Gong understood what poppet ear meant, and he blushed a little. Bai Ning smiled and rested his hand on Qin Gong's shoulder. He joked, "When do you plan to get married? Let me attend the wedding banquet." Qin Gong raised a flag for the masses. "When this battle is over, she'll be of marriageable age. After I ask her elders for their opinion, I'll apply for leave from the Lord to prepare for the wedding." Although Su Yanxiao's parents and uncles had passed away, her eldest aunt and cousins were still alive. The Su family also had other members. If Su Yanxiao wanted to get married, those people had the right to know even if they didn't have the right to decide. Qin Gong's family had always been a vassal of the Su family. Su Yanxiao was the daughter of Su Fei, a direct branch of the Su family. If she really married him, there would definitely be people who would be dissatisfied. However, Qin Gong was not afraid of this. If Su Yanxiao was willing to marry him, he would protect her for life. Bai Ning laughed. "There are many marriages in the world. You're lucky. Don't forget about the wedding banquet." Qin Gong said shyly, "Of course I won't forget. General Bai, you must drink until you're drunk." Chapter 1528. What's there to say? Jiang Pingji passed by in her military uniform. Her sharp ears overheard their conversation, so she interrupted and asked. Bai Ning laughed. "Feng Jing is preparing to marry a beautiful lady. He'll be hosting a banquet. He wants me to go and drink until I'm drunk." Jiang Pingji glanced at Qin Gong. He had a bright and warm smile on his face. She could tell that he was in a good mood. Don't say things like, "I'm going to get married after the war. Wife and children will warm the Kong bed." Jiang Pingji also learned about the certain death flag from the audience. It was common in dramas and movies. The main character who spoke would definitely die. The purpose was to set off the tragic atmosphere. Even though Jiang Pingji herself had raised countless flags, it was indeed inauspicious to say such things before the war. Qin Gong asked in surprise, "There's a saying for this?" Jiang Pingji said, "I don't know where I heard it, but those who said such things before the war basically never came back." Qin Gong's face turned pale. Bai Ning patted his shoulder and said in a rough voice, "Don't be afraid. Just spit a few times and take it back." It was originally a joke, but he didn't expect that Qin Gong would actually learn to do it seriously. He looked very cute. Jiang Pingji could not help but be speechless. "I lied to you. You two actually believed it." Qin Gong opened his innocent eyes wide, seeing that Jiang Pingji could not continue doing evil. She asked, Do you really plan to marry Lady Su after the war? Qin Gong nodded. He was immediately stunned. He asked her, "How did you know it was her, my lord?" Jiang Pingji asked in return. "If it wasn't for this intention, you wouldn't have to take care of everything even if she's the daughter of your former lord, right?" "That's what I think," Qin Gong said. "After the war, I'll marry her. I can take care of her in the future. It's killing two birds with one stone." Even though Jiang Pingji did not mistreat the children of defeated vassals, she could not stand the tripping of her subordinates. Since the successive defeats of Su Fei and Su Pei, the Su family, which used to be like the sun in the sky, had completely quietened down. If Su Fei and his wife were still alive, as the daughter of a vassal, Su Yinxiao's marriage would definitely be top-notch. Now that Su Yinxiao's parents were dead and her immediate family was no longer around, Su Yinxiao's marriage fell into the hands of her eldest aunt. Eldest aunt didn't treat Su Yinxiao harshly, but she wasn't as attentive and loving as her mother. Marriage was even more out of the question. Most of the time, she would be married to the legitimate son of a small aristocratic family. If she was unlucky, she might even be married to a commoner who had recently risen to power. Once she got married, Qin Gong would have to avoid arousing suspicion and would not be able to protect her. Rather than worrying like this, it would be better to just marry her. He would treat her like a treasure. Qin Gong was Jiang Pingji's trusted general. If Su Yinxiao married him, no one would dare to underestimate her in the future. Jiang Pingji smiled. "I'm so envious." Qin Gong was puzzled. "Is my lord envious of this general?" Jiang Pingji said. "It's good to be young. Isn't it enviable?" Qin Gong was confused. He didn't know what was so enviable about being young. This had nothing to do with what his lord had said before. But he could also tell that his lord was very much in favor of his marriage with Su Yinxiao. This made Qin Gong heave a sigh of relief. He wasn't afraid of anything else, but he was afraid that his lord wouldn't agree. If that happened, Qin Gong would be in a difficult position. He could either give up on Su Yinxiao or resign and live in seclusion. If he asked himself honestly, the possibility of him choosing the latter was higher. "Remember to leave a cup of wedding wine for me." Qin Gong smiled. "Yes, my lord." While they were chatting, the army was ready to set off. Jiang Pingji mounted her horse. "My lord, what are you doing?" Qin Gong was shocked. Was his lord going to? "It's not good to be idle all the time. My bones are getting hard," Jiang Pingji said. "Let's set off." Qin Gong was speechless. Was it really because of this willful reason? Qin Gong missed his old lord Su Fei very much. Although Su Fei wasn't very smart, he wouldn't be so bold as to rush to the front lines. The army set off in 3 directions. Jiang Pingji's expression was not very good. Her brows were tightly knitted. She led the army and set off naturally, not because she wanted to fight a war. She just had a bad premonition. This was a kind of natural intuition that had been honed through countless life and death experiences. It was hard to explain, but this intuition had saved her many times. The army quietly approached the enemy's camp. The scouts who set off first quickly returned with news. "Reporting to my lord, the enemy's camp is empty. The shadows in the tents are all straw branches." Judging from the ashes of the bonfire in the camp, they should have left less than 15 minutes ago. They split into 3 directions to outflank the enemy's camp, but they didn't expect the enemy to have already retreated. Qin Gong and Bai Ning each led a group of troops. When they heard the scouts' report, they immediately gave the order to chase after them. The enemy left in a hurry. They left some heavy and clumsy military supplies and rations in the camp that were not suitable to be taken away. It could be seen that the enemy left in a hurry. If they caught up with the enemy at this time, they would definitely win a great victory when the enemy was unprepared. Jiang Pingji felt that something was wrong. Her troops did not move. She asked the scout, "How's the bonfire?" The scout said, "Some are still burning, some have been extinguished. It's a mess." Jiang Pingji asked again, "What about the footprints near the bonfire?" The scout recalled carefully and reported truthfully. The footprints near the bonfire were a little messy. Jiang Pingji asked a few more questions in succession, such as the layout of the enemy's camp. The more she listened, the more she frowned. The general who was sent by the military counselors to protect his lord was puzzled. He asked, "My lord, is there something wrong?" Jiang Pingji grabbed the reins and said coldly, "There are many things wrong." They had the energy to prepare straw branches to disguise as human shadows. It can be seen that they were quite calm when they retreated. If that's the case, the bonfire, documents, and objects shouldn't be so messy. The general's heart turned cold after he heard that. He exclaimed, "Could it be a trap?" Jiang Pingji sneered, "I'm afraid we've been fooled. Send 2 groups of troops to recall Qin Gong and the others." "I'm afraid there's an ambush ahead." The general asked, "Don't we need to send troops to support them?" Jiang Pingji smiled. "We should also welcome our guests. Let's deal with the enemy first. Give the order. Get into formation and face the enemy." Not long after Jiang Pingji finished speaking, the enemy's battle cries suddenly rang out in the previously empty enemy's camp. They seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Arrows rained down from the sky. The enemy's sneak attack was astonishingly fast. Many people were hit before they could react. "They're hiding underground." Jiang Pingji revealed how the enemy appeared out of thin air in one sentence. It wasn't that there was no one in the camp. They were all hiding underground. Because the camp was very messy, it was impossible for the soldiers to move the items and check them one by one. As long as the soldiers spread out their sleeping mats and covered the holes where they were hiding, they would basically not be discovered. Chapter 1529. What are you waiting for? Let's go back. Jiang Pingji pulled out her god-slaying sword. Her eyes were fierce. The deputy general said, "Yes, sir." Jiang Pingji wanted to rush out and kill to her heart's content, but she still needed to command the army to defend against the enemy's sneak attack and seize the opportunity to counterattack. The enemy seized the initiative. As soon as they arrived, they rained arrows and disrupted the army's formation. Under such circumstances, if there was no chief commander to command and dispatch, the casualties would be terrible when the enemy rushed in. Jiang Pingji was reckless, but she never delayed important matters. "I wonder how Feng Jing and the others are doing." These troops were indeed elites who had been trained for many years. Jiang Pingji often arranged military exercises and rehearsed all kinds of unexpected situations. Therefore, even though the enemy seized the initiative this time, they reacted after the first wave of arrows. They shrank their formation and adopted a defensive formation. This was the method of minimizing losses. At the same time, it could reflect the true combat quality of an army. At the same time, the scouts sent by Jiang Pingji also desperately chased after Qin Gong and Bai Ning's troops. Unfortunately, it was night and visibility was limited. It took them a lot of effort to find the route of the 2 troops. They hurriedly chased after them, which wasted a lot of time. By the time they caught up with the 2 troops, the situation had changed. Bai Ning was cautious by nature. Even if he led the troops to chase after the enemy, he would still consider his surroundings. Therefore he was slower. When the scouts caught up, the army had not yet been ambushed. Bai Ning was also very surprised by the appearance of the scouts. The scouts did not have time to turn over and dismount from their horses. They directly conveyed the order, "Retreat." Bai Ning was stunned at first. Then he immediately understood something. He immediately ordered the army to turn around and retreat. However, the enemy was secretly watching them. The army's retreat was obvious, so they could not sit still. The originally pitch-black call suddenly lit up with countless orange flames, and countless fire arrows descended from the sky. Bai Ning was shocked, but he still looked calm on the surface. The soldiers also seemed to have taken a tranquilizer. They defended and retreated in an orderly manner at the same time. Was he not panicking? How could it be? He was panicking to death. He never thought that this was a trap set by the enemy. However, Bai Ning knew that as the chief commander, he could not panic. Once he panicked, the army would be like headless flies. They would run around without order and be surrounded and killed by the enemy sooner or later. If Bai Ning's luck was considered good, then Qin Gong's side was quite unlucky. He had completely stepped into the enemy's trap. When the scouts arrived, the scene was already in chaos. The 2 armies were fighting each other. The light of the fire spread, almost turning this part of the world into daylight. The soldiers' battle cries were sharp and resounding, as if they were about to pierce through one's eardrums. The enemy's sneak attack was quite sudden. Although Qin Gong was not injured, he remembered the time when he followed Yang Si and was blocked by Han Yu in the Longsi Canyon. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly. What kind of lousy luck did he have to be ambushed time and time again? It used to be Han Yu, and now it was Wei Yong. However, they were lucky to have been saved by the Lord last time. Now they could only rely on themselves and the soldiers around them. If he didn't fight for a way out, he would probably be buried here. At this moment, Qin Gong was still thinking about what his lord had said before he sent out the troops. It's better not to say things like, "I'm going to get married after this battle, so that my wife and children can stay by my side." I don't know where I heard this before, but those who said this before the war basically never came back. Never to return. The enemy had set up this sneak attack with the intention of making them never come back. Qin Gong didn't want to die here. He still had to make contributions and accumulate merits, so that he could go back and marry the eldest lady of the Su family and protect her for the rest of her life. In the distant rear, Su Yanxiao suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. The maid who was sleeping outside put on some clothes and came over. Is the eldest lady going to get up at night? When the maid brought the candle closer, she saw that Su Yanxiao's nightgown was almost soaked with sweat. No, I just had a very scary dream, but now that I'm awake, I can't remember what it was, the maid also said. Look at the eldest lady's face covered with sweat. It must have been a nightmare. I'm going to ask the kitchen to prepare a bowl of soup for you. Su Yanxiao shook her head. No, it's the middle of the night. I won't be able to sleep after drinking soup. The maid said, If that's the case, I'll stay and talk with the eldest lady for a while. Su Yanxiao nodded lightly. The maid beside her was sent by Qin Gong. She was careful, considerate, and efficient. She quite liked her. When she thought of Qin Gong, an unexplainable panic rose in her left chest. Eldest lady, are you feeling uncomfortable? The maid saw her raising her hand to cover her chest, frowning slightly, and her lips pale. She suddenly became nervous. Su Yanxiao said, The dream I had just now seemed to be related to Qin Sanlang. Did something happen to him at the front? Since the two of them had a tacit understanding, Su Yanxiao changed the way she addressed him and called him Qin Sanlang. It was neither too intimate nor too distant. The maid said, Old people always say that dreams are the opposite of reality. Qin Langjun is good at fighting. How could something happen to him? Su Yanxiao was skeptical, but she still felt uneasy. The maid tried to coax her to sleep. Su Yanxiao couldn't help but put her hand under the pillow, and her fingertips touched a cold jade hairpin. I learned it from the craftsman. This fox hairpin is crudely carved. When the war at the front is over, I'll give it to the eldest lady. Su Yanxiao couldn't help but hold it tightly, as if it could absorb some strength. You said you would come back and marry me. She had been embroidering a wedding dress these days, and it would be finished in half a year, just in time for her hairpin ceremony. After that, they would get married. The maid heard her whisper and laughed. Apart from the eldest lady, who else could Qin Langjun have in his heart? Su Yanxiao couldn't help but blush, and her flustered mood calmed down a lot. The situation on Qin Gong's side was indeed not that bad. Relying on the valiant fighting quality of the army, even if the enemy's attack was fierce, they could still maintain their formation and not collapse. As the battle dragged on, the situation gradually stabilized. After all, Qin Gong was immortal, and he couldn't be invulnerable. He was seriously injured in the chaos, but he didn't seem to feel it. He commanded the enemy to kill, and seized the opportunity to break out of the encirclement. We shouldn't continue fighting. Since this is the enemy's trap, the longer we delay, the more disadvantageous it will be for us. Qin Gong was injured, but his mind was very clear. In the face of the enemy's ambush, they could only try to reduce their losses. Of the 36 stratagems, retreat is the best. The deputy general on the side said, General, do you feel that something is wrong? Qin Gong covered his arm, and his expression was somewhat fierce. The number of the enemy's troops is strange. They most likely divided their troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Since this was a killing trap set by the enemy, It meant that the previous retreat of the Nye family, due to internal strife, was fake. The enemy still had more than 200,000 troops. Even if they divided their troops into 3 groups, the number of troops lying in ambush was obviously not that many. It was not difficult to speculate that the enemy was very likely to transfer the remaining troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Luring the enemy into the trap, luring the tiger away from the mountain, one was linked to the other, and it was clearly a killing trap. The deputy general said, "General, what should we do?" Chapter 1530. I've long heard that Lu Shi has many elites under his command, but I didn't expect that we couldn't keep them here. Fan Chen watched as the enemy fought and retreated, and his heart was filled with impatience and indescribable helplessness. If it had been any other vassal's army, they would have long been thrown into disarray after encountering such an ambush. Not to mention retreating in a short period of time. It was already a blessing from the heavens that the entire army had not been wiped out. Comparisons were odious. Was Jiang Pingji born to teach other feudal vassals how to behave? Jiang Pingji was not only the legendary child of another family, but also the lord of another family. There was nothing to be envious of. The trusted general in charge of the ambush rode forward and asked Fan Chen's opinion with a solemn expression. "Military counselor, should we pursue them?" "Of course. Zishuan has given a strict order to delay as much time as possible." Fan Chen raised his hand to wipe the hot sweat from his forehead. His inner shirt, which was stuck to his neck, was drenched. He said, "Lu Shi's subordinates are all clever. I guess they've discovered that the number of troops ambushing them isn't right. Even if they think with their toes, they'll know that we'll deploy troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass." "Yes, sir." The general didn't dare to waste time. He ordered the troops to pursue the enemy. They couldn't let the enemy ruin their plan. "General, they're catching up." The deputy general's face was covered in blood. Only his black eyes were clean. "Don't panic. Just fight and retreat." Qin Gong's expression was firm. His face was covered in blood, making the brown scar on his face look even more terrifying. "Is that Nye camp ahead? When we left, the fire wasn't so strong." The deputy general said, "General, do you mean there are enemies over there?" Qin Gong's expression was solemn. "The Lord is ambushed over there. We have to rush there no matter what." According to the scouts sent by the Lord, she was ambushed at Nye camp. However, Nye camp had long been empty. Where did the ambush come from? After thinking about it, Qin Gong thought of the underground. The enemy was most likely hiding underground and hiding from the eyes and ears of our army. However, how did they hide the soil from our scouts when they dug so many pits to hide people? The person who arranged this ambush was truly terrifying. Whether it was in terms of scheming a person's heart or in other aspects, it was almost flawless. Si Jiang had a bad feeling when he heard this. The Lord had been ambushed in the enemy's lair. What kind of F***CK was that? Zhanjiang Pass. Not only was the deputy general worried about his lord, but he was also worried about his own nest. He was really worried that his nest would be destroyed. Qin Gong said confidently, "Zhanjiang Pass has sufficient troops, and there are a few strategists overseeing it. We won't lose it." Due to the enemy's relentless pursuit, Qin Gong's side had to pay a few more casualties before they managed to shake off their pursuers. Along the way, they bumped into the remnants of Bai Ning's army. If they hadn't reacted in time, they might have had to fight in the dark. "Brother Qin, you're not dead, right?" Qin Gong smiled bitterly as he pulled out the arrow from his arm. He took out a piece of cloth and tied it around the wound, temporarily stopping the bleeding. He was in so much pain that his face was pale. He said in a loud voice, "I'm not dead. I'm alive and kicking." Bai Ning said, "Reorganize the troops, turn around, and kill these bugs that are chasing us." Qin Gong panted heavily and said, "The Lord has been ambushed. General Bai, it's better not to continue fighting." Bai Ning waved his hand and said casually, "That's easy. Brother Qin, take half of the troops to support the Lord. I'll lead some people to delay the pursuers." At that moment, there was no better way. Qin Gong cupped his fists and said, "General Bai, take care." "No problem." Bai Ning laughed. "I didn't get to drink your wedding wine, and my precious daughter's wedding wine. When I go to hell, I'll make a scene. Qin Gong ordered half of the troops to support Jiang Pingji. Seeing that he had left, Bai Ning angrily spat out a mouthful of blood and clenched the blood-stained weapon in his hand. The sticky blood had dried up, and some of it was still warm. He shouted in the direction of the enemy. All troops, fall into formation. As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers on the side raised their horns and blew them to convey the military order. As soon as the military order was given, the soldiers with shields lined up in the first echelon, forming a thick defensive wall on one side. The other hand held a long spear that was more than 10 feet long to block the first enemy that rushed up. The second echelon of soldiers also held long spears and assisted in cleaning up the fish that slipped through the net. The archers were in the third echelon, trying their best to seize the opportunity to cause heavy damage to the enemy. Bai Ning said in a gruff voice, "I'm standing here. No one can get past me." Although Bai Ning was not young, his archery skills were ranked among the best in the army. His specialty was shooting 7 arrows at the same time. He used a 2-stone heavy bow. When he shot an arrow, not only could he poke a hole in a person's head, but he could also skewer the next person. The eyes of the two sides were bloodshot. Bai Ning's quiver was out of ammunition, so he picked up his weapon and rushed forward. He killed until his weapon was bent. At the same time, the situation on Jiang Pingji's side was much better than Bai Ning and Qin Gong had imagined. Apart from the unexpected first wave of sneak attacks, they basically did not suffer much in the subsequent confrontations. People could not see the entire battle situation, but Jiang Pingji had a spiritual realm. Within the realm, even flying insects and mosquitoes were under her control, not to mention people. She knew where the army was the weakest, where they needed support, and where the enemy could break through. Under her command, the army calmly withdrew from the enemy's ambush. How could the enemy let go of a fat piece of meat that was already in their mouths? Of course they would bite like mad dogs. "My lord, the reinforcements are here." Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. What's going on with the reinforcements? It was impossible for reinforcements to come at this time. Jiang Pingji was a very cautious person. Even if she led the army to attack the enemy, she was prepared for a sneak attack on her base. It was better to be safe than sorry. Even if all the information showed that Nie Liang did not have the opportunity to clean up the hidden dangers within the Nie family, Jiang Pingji had laughed at this point. At that time, she mocked Nie Liang for being too soft on his people, but in the end, he was the one who suffered the consequences. The last time she received news from the Nie family was only 3 to 5 days before Nie Liang died of illness. The few tumors of the Nie family were still alive and well. According to the time of Nie Liang's death, even if he instructed Wei Yong and the others to clean up the tumors before he died, it was reasonable to say that it was too late. Due to various reasons, Jiang Pingji was skeptical about the two speculations of internal strife in the Nie family and Wei Yong's withdrawal of troops. Now that they had encountered an ambush, it proved that the two speculations were false. Not only did Wei Yong not withdraw his troops, but it was very likely that he had mobilized his troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. The ambush was just a ploy to delay the troops. Countless thoughts flashed through Jiang Pingji's mind. The soldier said, "The reinforcements were brought by General Qin." Not long after he finished speaking, Qin Gong, who was covered in blood, had already ridden forward. "My lord, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Jiang Pingji asked. "Did you meet General Bai on the way?" Chapter 1531. My Lord, Zhanjiang Pass. Although Qin Gong looked confident, he was not sure if Zhanjiang Pass could be defended against a sneak attack. Jiang Pingji said, "Don't worry. I told Wen Zheng and the rest to be careful before the army set off. Zhanjiang Pass will definitely not be lost." Qin Gong was slightly relieved, but he still had doubts. Jiang Pingji noticed this and smiled to comfort him. "If Zhanjiang Pass is breached, I will hug the keyboard and kneel in front of the old chief until I die." Qin Gong was speechless. "Old chief? Keyboard? What the hell?" Jiang Pingji coughed softly and covered up her words perfectly. She was getting more and more adept at lying. The old chief was the one who gave me the strange book in my dream. Later, he continued to teach me in my dream. He's like a teacher and a friend. Qin Gong suddenly realized. I see. What she said was not entirely false. The old chief had indeed trained her meticulously in the few years between choosing his successor and retiring. Teacher and friend. It was not wrong to use these words to describe their relationship. Jiang Pingji was a wolf. She was aggressive and liked to cause trouble. She wanted to challenge the authority and position of the alpha wolf all the time. The new and old chief often fought because of disagreements. The old chief was a man who looked like a smiling tiger, but was tough on the inside. Jiang Pingji was tough and arrogant from the inside out. One was the alpha wolf who was about to retire. The other was the new alpha wolf. It would be strange if they did not fight. Of course, the old chief had been a commander for more than 100 years, and had been through countless wars. Jiang Pingji was still a new driver on the road. Even if she could fight, she was tortured badly at first. Later on, she barely managed to fight to a draw. It was the only time they tied. Jiang Pingji suspected that the other party went easy on her. I'm leaving tomorrow. The 7th Army is the best army in the Federation. I hope you don't ruin its reputation. Jiang Pingji was so tired that she could not even move her fingers. Her mouth was still hard and smelly. The future belongs to more outstanding young people. The 7th Army will become stronger and sharper in my hands. No one will dare to offend me. Look at what she said. She was just short of saying that the other party was old and should have given up his position long ago. However, the old general smiled and said, All right, I'll leave the faith of the 7th Army to you. The two women were sweating profusely as they lay on the training ground. Compared to Jiang Pingji's disheveled appearance, the other woman was still standing. I still don't know why the old general retired. You're not old enough to retire. The average lifespan of a commoner in the Federation was around 250 years. Someone like Jiang Pingji could live up to 500 years. At that time, the old chief was only a little more than 200. He was at the prime of his life. Otherwise, he would not have been able to suppress Jiang Pingji, who was an unreasonable wolf cub. In fact, this old commander's position in the Federation was second only to the marshal, and he was extremely experienced. Just because they had a lifespan of 500 years did not mean that they would live to be 500 years old. The average lifespan of a soldier in the army was less than 100 years old. Even though a legion commander was a high-ranking member of the army, it was still a high-risk job. 99% of legion commanders died on the front lines. Very few of them died of old age, let alone retire midway. At that time, many people even mocked the First Battle Legion for producing a coward who was afraid of death. My body is not suited to stay in this position. It looks fine now, but I don't know when it will collapse. You'll know the inside story when you have a higher level of authority. The old chief sighed. The 7th Legion has always been the vanguard with the strongest combat power. I won't be able to hold on for long. But the 7th Legion must have a capable and unyielding successor who can carry the flag. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Was it because she was the best at fighting? If the old chief's current combat state was not good, then what about when he was at his peak? The more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became. The old chief sneered. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about when I'll be able to press you to the ground and beat you up. Hey, you went easy on me just now. The amount of water you used was comparable to a dam releasing water. Was she a salted fish that needed to go easy on him? You haven't awakened yet. Even if my condition has deteriorated, I won't lose to a girl who hasn't awakened yet. Jiang Pingji looked at the rising flames in the Nye camp. She did not know why she thought of the past. At that time, she was too tired. She was exhausted after the fierce battle. In the end, the old chief carried her to the warm cabin like a burlap sack. When she woke up, the old chief had already packed his things and left the military headquarters. Jiang Pingji was in a hurry to take office. The front line of the Federation was at war again, so she forgot about this matter. Now that she thought about it, she suddenly remembered something. What the hell did the old chief mean by awakening? It was fine if she did not remember, but now that she remembered, she had to clarify. It was the same logic as obsessive-compulsive disorder. She would feel uncomfortable if she did not clarify. However, before that, there was one more thing to do. Jiang Pingji took Qin Gong and the troops under her tent to rescue Bai Ning. Bai Ning was in a sorry state at that moment. His arms and thighs were injured, and the armor on his body was tattered. Many parts of the armor were pockmarked by the enemy's weapons. If it was not for the fact that the armor was well made, and that he had been injured for Bai Ning a few times, he would have been dismounted and trampled into meat paste by the chaotic army. He did not have time to check the condition of his wound. After killing a wave of enemies in a hurry, he used a strip of cloth to stop the bleeding. His left hand was almost numb. Their side suffered heavy casualties, but the enemy did not gain much advantage either. The number of casualties was also high. However, because of the disparity in military strength, Bai Ning's side could not hold on for much longer. Once the army's formation was broken by the enemy, the result would be 1,000 miles of retreat, and they would be crushed into meat paste by the enemy. Let's fight to the death with these bastards. It's not a loss to die here. Bai Ning's eyes were bloodshot. Even though he was injured all over, he did not care. Kill one to recoup his losses, kill two to earn a small profit. Even if he died, he would drag a few more down with him. Just as Bai Ning was about to launch the last attack, the enemy ordered the archers to release a rain of arrows again. In the end, an unexpected turn of events occurred. Because it was night time, the pale golden ripples that shrouded the army were particularly clear. As a miracle, Nie Jun saw this, and his high and mighty momentum instantly dropped. The arrows stopped in mid-air, as if they were intercepted by the layer of ripples. They lost their momentum and fell with a rustle, hitting Bai Ning's head. My lord is here. He had seen this scene before, and he was sure that it was his lord. Is his life more important than yours? Jiang Pingji led the troops over. When she saw Bai Ning's sorry state, she suddenly became angry. Are a bunch of good-for-nothings worth paying with your life? Jiang Pingji reprimanded Bai Ning angrily. Bai Ning was prepared to fight to the death, but now that his lord was here, he did not know what expression to put on. He could only listen to the reprimand obediently. Little did he know that his seemingly majestic lord was also being reprimanded by another person. You Abba, you were ambushed and attacked. Where is your spiritual realm? Jiang Pingji quibbled. I didn't want to cheat too much, so my realm only covered a few feet around me. You Abba, it's obvious that you've been pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger for too long. What's the use of these excuses? The old chief's mouth is quite sharp. You Abba, if you return to the Federation in this state, won't the 7th Army be assimilated into a pig farm? Not using too much ability doesn't mean that you have to be schemed against like real people in ancient times. Jiang Xiaojiu, I've prepared the keyboard for you. Chapter 1532. My lord. Bai Ning clearly felt that his lord's mood was not right. He didn't dare to raise his voice for fear of igniting the firecracker. Jiang Pingji gripped the hilt of her sword tightly and sneered. Order the soldiers to get into formation and face the enemy. Tonight, no one can leave. Bai Ning's body trembled, and his voice was like thunder. Yes, my lord. Ordinary soldiers couldn't feel it, but Qin Gong and Bai Ning, who were near Jiang Pingji, were secretly shocked. Most of the generals who had some achievements in martial arts could feel qi, such as the enemy's murderous aura and the murderous intent in the dark. Their awareness combined with their reflexes, which had been trained for a long time, allowed them to avoid many fatal attacks. The stronger their martial arts, the clearer their perception. There was no doubt that Qin Gong, who became famous at a young age, and Bai Ning, who was experienced and ruthless, belonged to this category. They clearly felt a strong murderous intent emanating from their lord's body. Not only did they feel uncomfortable, but the war horses around them were also affected. Bai Ning didn't care about the injuries on his body. He was speechless and said, My God, how many people has my lord killed? To cultivate such a murderous aura, it was probably not enough to kill 1,000 people. She probably needed to kill 10,000 people. No matter how many times he tried, Bai Ning couldn't associate his lord, who was usually playful, angry, and talkative, with her decisive killing on the battlefield. It was like he couldn't bear to see Li Hanmei kill people on the battlefield with a gun and go home to pick up a sweater to knit. Jiang Pingji acted as if she didn't hear Bai Ning's complaints. She gave several military orders in a row. The enemies who caught up were shocked when they saw the formation. Some of the generals couldn't help but sneer. Are the troops under Lu Shi's command indulging in fantasy? Isn't that right? Now they're like stray dogs. How can a group of defeated generals and soldiers make a comeback? Some people sneered. Naturally, there were also people who were secretly shocked. Some even had the idea of fighting back. The reinforcements who arrived late didn't see it. But the first batch of soldiers who surrounded Bai Ning saw a miracle again. The sky full of arrows was blocked by a layer of strange golden ripples. The gods had personally participated in the battle. They were just a group of ordinary people. Could they defeat the gods? Thus, one wave of soldiers had high morale, while the other wave had low morale. When the two were compared, the effect was very obvious. No matter how the general scolded them, the group of soldiers did not dare to move forward. Some of them even muttered things like "God is coming," and "God will curse us to death." Their legs were trembling, and their hands were weak. They were so scared that they pushed back. Seeing this, the general could only attack angrily. He chopped off the heads of 3 or 4 deserters, intimidating the group of soldiers in an instant. Whoever dares to take a step back will end up like this. The soldiers at the front were still dealing with the enemy, but these cowards actually wanted to desert. It was better for them to die, so as not to affect the morale of the army. The soldier cried, "It's not that we want to escape. It's obviously that God is here. God is here. Arrows can't hurt them." The general sneered, "Can't injure him?" Spouting nonsense and disturbing the morale of the army. This is a crime worthy of death. After saying that, the general cut off the soldier's head. Because he used a lot of strength, he even cut off half of the soldier's upper body. After killing more than 10 people in a row, the chaos was finally suppressed. The cowardly soldiers could only charge forward again. The general revealed a disdainful sneer and shook off the warm blood on the blade. What God? What can't hurt them? If they had this ability, what happened to those enemy soldiers who died tragically because of their sneak attack? The two armies fought fiercely and both sides suffered casualties. Didn't they see that the enemy not only had the corpses of their own soldiers, but also the corpses of the enemy soldiers? What God? It's just a cheap trick to shake the morale of the army. What happened at the front line? Fan Chen came late and did not see the miracle. He only saw some of the soldiers being afraid to fight and disrupting the army formation. So he sent people out to suppress them. The general cupped his fists and reported, "It's just the enemy deliberately mystifying things, using some miracle to scare people." Fan Chen raised his eyebrows. "Miracle? What miracle?" The general roughly explained the process. Fan Chen frowned after listening. Is there something wrong?" The general asked. Fan Chen suddenly thought of something. His expression was faintly excited, and the hand holding the reins trembled slightly. His breathing was rapid and excited, and he almost lost his voice. "Maybe Lu Shi is also here." The general's eyes widened, as if he did not hear what Fan Chen said. What did he mean by "Lu Shi is also here"? Fan Chen said, "Lu Shi is a person with unparalleled combat power. According to investigations, during the 3 years she was studying in Langya County, she often fought fiercely with others. Now that she has become a duke, she still does not change her bad habits. She goes to the front line to fight generals, and even more. She even wants to get involved in a chaotic battle between 2 armies." This was not the first time the general had heard this, but he always found it unbelievable. Why did the people always say good men don't become soldiers, good women don't marry? It was not only because being a soldier was lowly and difficult to stand out, but also because the survival rate was low. No one wanted to bring up their own son or new husband to fight on the battlefield. From this, it could be seen how touching the survival rate was, and how dangerous the battle between the 2 armies was. Dignified dukes actually fought in a chaotic battle like ordinary soldiers. What would happen if they were mistakenly killed in front of the battle? Not to mention dukes, ordinary generals would not personally participate in a chaotic battle. Even if they participated in the battle to kill, they would bring 20 to 30 bodyguards with them. Soldiers were easy to find, but generals who knew how to fight were not easy to find. Every one of them was considered a gold mine, and they could not be lost. Generals were like this, let alone dukes. Lu Shi left Zhanjiang Pass. Fan Chen sneered. That so-called miracle has only appeared twice. According to the thinking of the ancients, not everyone could be blessed by the gods. They only knew of Jiangpingji. It was the same miracle. So could it be confirmed that Jiangpingji was also at the front line? If that was the case, Fan Chen could not easily let her go. Jiangpingji still had no heir. If she died here, the power she left behind would definitely collapse. Fan Chen was secretly calculating, but Jiangpingji, the person in question, seemed to be on steroids. She killed people so quickly that even her own people were afraid. The enemies in front of her were not like living people, but more like straws in the field. She was not holding a sickle to cut straws. She was clearly driving a reaper to reap the heads of rows of people. This was not the scariest thing. The scariest thing was that after killing so many people, her eyes were still clear. What did this prove? It only proved that the enemies were not human in her eyes. Perhaps they were not even comparable to chickens and ducks. Ordinary people would feel uncomfortable killing too many chickens. Fortunately, this person was their lord and not their enemy. Because it was dark at night, and their field of vision was limited, Fan Chen and the others had not noticed this area. He ordered the troops to split up and attack the rear. As soon as the troops were mobilized, Jiangpingji knew his plan. Feng Jing, go to the rear and command. The enemies are coming. She retreated after killing for a while. As soon as she approached, Qin Gong smelled the suffocating smell of blood. Yes. Chapter 1533. As soon as Fan Chen moved, Jiangpingji knew that the sneak attack from the rear had failed. Instead, they had lost a lot of troops. I wonder how the battle at Zhanjiang Pass is. Jiangpingji was already covered in blood. She looked terrifying, but the blood belonged to the enemy. Not even a strand of her hair was missing. There was a beep next to her ear. The old chief had sent her a private message. Your Abba. If you want to know what's going on over there, just use your spiritual realm. Don't tell me you're that weak. Jiangpingji had transmigrated and changed into an ordinary person's body. It was understandable that her physical skills had declined, but it was not to the extent that her spiritual realm was weak. Lu Shi is an ordinary person. Excessive use of the spiritual realm will cause harm to this body. Besides, I haven't used it for years. I can't remember it now. Jiangpingji smiled awkwardly. Her smile was covered by blood. Sincerity could not be seen. Instead, there was a hint of ferocity. It's not a good thing to be at ease for too long. I'm really worried that I won't be able to adapt to the pace of the Federation in the future. Although she said that, she still used her spiritual realm to take a look at the battle at Zhanjiang Pass. The city gate was secure. It had not been lost. The enemy had not succeeded yet. She quickly retracted it after taking a look. At the same time, Wei Xi looked in a certain direction outside Zhanjiang Pass. His eyes showed some confusion. Just now I seemed to have sensed the Lord. Was it an illusion? There were 150,000 enemies outside Zhanjiang Pass. Their battle cries shook the heavens. Flames soared into the sky and lit up the place until it was a city that never slept. With the previous lesson, Wei Xi had brought enough troops and hundreds of catapults. The power of the siege was far greater than the previous time. As the saying goes, soldiers with arms and water with earth. No matter how many catapults the enemy had, the city gate was still secure. It was just that the battle on the city wall was particularly fierce. The stench of kerosene stimulated everyone's nerves. In everyone's eyes, there was nothing else but the enemy. Tonight it was either the enemy or they who would die. What a tough bone to chew. He can still defend in this situation. The general of the Nye camp looked at the city wall covered with ladders and ropes. His expression was full of malice and ferocity. His black eyes were reflected by the flames. Wei Xi said, Lu Shi's vigilance is far beyond our imagination. If a sudden attack was launched, the defending side would not be prepared, and would most likely be flustered. According to Nye Liang's plan before his death, Jiang Pingji was confident that she would dispatch the army to pursue the bait they had thrown out. The garrison at Zhanjiang Pass would be greatly weakened. They took advantage of the night to attack the city, and the enemy hastily responded. Faced with the Nye family's army that went all out, even if Jiang Pingji's side could resist for a while, they would definitely not be able to defend Zhanjiang Pass. In order to protect themselves, they could only lead their troops to abandon the pass and retreat. The result was a huge disappointment. Wei Long led his troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Although the enemy hastily responded to the battle, they did not immediately collapse. Reinforcements arrived just in time. Jiang Pingji was far more cautious and meticulous than he and Nye Liang had imagined. She was clearly a 22 or 23-year-old woman, but her way of doing things was more cautious and cunning than a 45-year-old man. She had already believed the news of Nye Jun's retreat, and in the end, she even ordered Zhanjiang Pass to be on high alert to prevent night attacks. He really didn't know whether he should say that she was doing something superfluous, or praise her for being as cunning as a fox, treacherous and suspicious. The general said fiercely, "So what if we're vigilant? We must pass this trial tonight." This time, Nye Jun was determined to take down Zhanjiang Pass. If they did not succeed this time, they did not know when the next opportunity would come. Of course, we must pass Zhanjiang Pass tonight, no matter what price they had to pay. Looking at the huge fireballs being hurled by the catapults onto the walls of Zhanjiang Pass, the battlements, and even the city gates, Wei Long's state of mind was extremely calm. That Shizhong is still somewhat useful. Shizhong had been randomly slashed a few times by bandits with a hatchet. His right hand could not write for a short period of time. The wound on his cheek was too deep, causing his left eye to be completely blind. There was also an extremely long wound from his left shoulder to his collarbone. With such a serious injury, even if he had amazing willpower to copy and memorize the blueprint, his hands were not strong enough. He could not draw such a detailed blueprint at all. Since he could not draw, he thought of a plan and simply verbally explained. He verbally improved the existing armaments, such as coating the stones of the catapults with a layer of kerosene, and igniting them before they were hurled. The lethality of fireballs and simple stones was not the same. After Shizhong's improvements, the catapults did indeed cause great pressure to the pass. Without Jiang Pingji, the godly archer, and due to the weather, the soldiers controlling the ballistae could not effectively destroy the enemy's catapults. After such a long time, they had only destroyed 4 or 5 catapults. In desperation, Wei Ci could only order the catapults on the city walls to aim at the enemy's catapults. The efficiency was much higher than destroying the catapults with the ballistae. At the same time, they could also target the enemy's archers. There was still a stalemate above and below the city walls. For the time being, Zhanjiang Pass was not in danger of being lost. Jiang Pingji's side was much more relaxed. Even if the enemy outnumbered them, with her precise command, she could always make the enemy suffer losses. Not only that, she also took the time to ask the old chief about it, lest she forgot about it after the war. I remember before the old chief retired, he once mentioned awakening. What is that? Yuaba, you're still half-hearted in war. If your subordinates knew about this, how would they feel? Don't change the topic. There was silence on the other side for a while, as if she had to rack her brains to think of a few sentences. Yuaba. About this matter. Sighed the child has no mother. It's a long story. Make the long story short. Yuaba. The current power system of the Federation focuses on developing the limits of the human body. The key lies in the genes. Under normal circumstances, the genes of ordinary people will evolve with the development of inheritance from generation to generation. However, some geniuses can condense the evolution of hundreds, or even thousands of years into a few short years. This is genetic unlocking, completely unlocking the shackles, and exploding the limits of the human body. However, no one can answer how many genetic locks exist. Perhaps the end is the eternal life that all scientists dream of. Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. Yuaba, I'm going off topic. The awakening I mentioned is essentially similar to genetic unlocking, but it's also different. The latter is to develop the potential of the human body, while the former is to trace back to the source and return to the ancestral inheritance. Why do you think the direct descendants of the Jiang family were attacked by the forces of the heavenly brain? Because the direct descendants of the Jiang family have an ancient bloodline. You are the last direct descendant, and at the same time, the only one who has the chance to awaken the ancestral power. This power is what the defector heavenly brain fears the most. Only you can completely kill it. What if I can't awaken? You die. The Federation will be buried with you. Don't worry, I'll mail you the best coffin. Heartless woman. Jiang Pingji curled her lips. No, this body belongs to Lu Shi. How can I awaken? You the ancient bloodline of the Jiang family is rather special. It doesn't attach to the body, but to the soul. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyes, as if remembering something. The awakening thing can change hair color? Chapter 1534. Changing gender? So vicious? Jiang Pingji said that, but her eyes lit up. She was eager to try. You what do you want to do? Based on her understanding of Jiang Pingji, it was probably not a good thing. She had no integrity at all. Jiang Pingji said, well, we are all adults. Let's not beat around the bush. I want to cry Zixiao. Your you should really let your little girl see what kind of animal you are. What kind of tricks are you thinking about? Jiang Pingji muttered. Just tell me if it's possible. You no, give up. The Jiang family's atavistic ability is fire control. It doesn't support gender change. Fire control? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but complain. Isn't this the same ability derived from unlocking my genes? She thought it would be some amazing special ability. In the end, it was just playing with fire. You it's different. Before the awakening, it was normal fire. After the awakening, the fire can burn everything. It's said to be the fire of extreme yang that can cleanse everything. Even the Federation's warships with the strongest defense can't withstand the damage of that kind of fire. Not only can it burn physical bodies, but it can also burn spiritual energy and life. Awakening the ancient bloodline ability, apart from the change of the fire, will also strengthen the body by 100 times. At the same time, it will greatly increase one's lifespan. Sky Brain hated the direct descendants of the Jiang family. Besides the old grudge from 2,000 years ago, there was another reason. Jiang Pingji echoed, it's really good. I won't need flint to start a fire in the future. You To be honest, if your ancestors heard what you said, they would most likely die with grievances. Including Jiang Pingji, there were only 3 awakened in 2,000 years. The first 2 were famous people who killed so many enemies of the Federation that they were terrified. But Jiang Pingji used them to start a fire? Be a little more promising, okay? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but roll her eyes. What was the use of her ability, no matter how amazing it was? The enemy was a group of ordinary people. In order not to bully them, she restrained her spiritual domain. What else could she do? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but complain. If I don't use it to start a fire, what else can I do? Didn't the old chief just say that the fire after awakening can burn spiritual energy? In the words of this era, the human spirit is the so-called 3 souls and 7 spirits. This fire of mine is enough to extinguish a person's soul. It's just a war. There's no need to be so ruthless. All in all, this is a useless cheat. For the current her, it was indeed useless. Your His words were reasonable, and no one could refute him. Jiang Pingji's current state was like a main account with a full set of godly equipment going to the beginner's village. She could still defeat all the other players in the village without her godly equipment. To put it bluntly, it was meaningless to give her a set of godly equipment at that moment. The old commander felt that he should redeem himself. Your don't underestimate it. It will be very useful in the future. The old chief went offline, leaving Jiang Pingji with a lot of questions. Jiang Pingji looked at the chaotic battle and took a deep breath. She told herself again and again that this was a battle between ordinary people. She had to restrain herself. Although Jiang Pingji had been talking to the old chief for a few minutes, she did not stop killing the enemies. No matter if it was an enemy or a comrade, no one would have thought that Jiang Pingji could still be distracted by talking to someone while she was on a killing spree. If they knew, they would be so depressed that they would vomit blood. Of course, Fan Chun and the others were depressed enough. No matter how they ambushed or how they deployed their troops to attack, the enemy seemed to have predicted their actions in advance. Their defense was impenetrable. Even if they outnumbered the enemy by a lot, they did not have much of an advantage. At that moment, news came from the front line. Military advisor, the enemy has a valiant general. His combat power is really terrifying. The soldiers can't stop him at all. This statement was embellished. In fact, the soldiers in that area were scared out of their wits. Almost no one dared to advance and attack. If they did not take any measures, the enemy might use that area as a breakthrough and counterattack. Fan Chun asked, "Terrifying? How terrifying can he be? 100 people can't do anything to him." Fan Chun frowned slightly. It seemed that he did not expect Jiang Pingji to have such an inhuman existence. To describe someone's bravery, people always like to use, "One man can hold the pass against 10,000, or one man can fight against 100. Whether it was 10,000, or one man can fight against 100, the words 10,000 and 100 were empty words. The general idea was that there were many people, not really 10,000 or 100. Even if it was a highly skilled general, when faced with hundreds of enemies, he would most likely lose his life. No matter how skilled he was, he had 2 hands and 2 feet. There was a limit to his physical strength. It was impossible for him to not be tired or injured. If Jiang Pingji really had such a general under her command, she should have some reputation. Unless a light flashed in Fan Chun's mind, he suddenly thought of something. He just speculated that Jiang Pingji was very likely to be at the front of the battle. At that moment, a young general with unparalleled bravery appeared. Could it be? How is Lu Shi's combat power? He asked the deputy general beside him. This deputy general was someone who had seen Jiang Pingji fight generals at the front of the battle. The deputy general answered honestly, "This person is a brave general that is rare in the world. If I were to fight him, I wouldn't last more than half a cup of tea." Jiang Pingji had fought generals at the front of the battle and killed several people in a row. Those generals were all ranked highly in the Nye camp. "Why are you suddenly asking about this, military counselor?" Fan Chun said, "Take a guess. Is it possible that the young general who reported to us just now is Lu Shi?" The deputy general was shocked by Fan Chun's speculation. Is this possible? He expressed that he did not understand the way the vassal's brain worked. It was fine to fight generals. If one's martial strength was high, there was a high chance of survival in a one-on-one fight. However, it was a chaotic battle now. The soldiers of the 2 armies could only rely on the color of the cloth tied around their armors, necks, or arms to distinguish between the enemy and their allies. As a vassal, it was fine that she did not stay at the rear and came to launch a sneak attack. Now she even dared to intervene in a chaotic battle. He admired her for being a man. Fan Chun said coldly, "There is a 70% to 80% chance that it is accurate." Even if it was not accurate, Fan Chun wanted this young general to die here. Jiang Pingji had such a capable general under her command. It would greatly boost the morale of the 2 armies when they fought. It would be a disaster to keep him alive. Fan Chun's speculation was naturally correct. The person who was unrestrained and killed 300 enemy troops in a short time of half a stick of incense was Jiang Pingji. I feel like my identity has been exposed. After a while, Jiang Pingji clearly felt that the enemy was deliberately targeting her. Chapter 1535. The enemy underestimated the power of the iron whip. When they aimed their long spears at White, which was under Jiang Pingji's crotch, Jiang Pingji waved her long whip and tied up all their spears like a snake. She exerted strength in her wrists and easily snatched the spears from the hands of more than a dozen people. She flicked her whip again and returned the spears to the enemy. Some pierced through the cheeks, some aimed at the neck, and some pierced through the heart. They couldn't even touch Whitey, let alone hurt Jiang Pingji. That was a pain in the ass. Fan Chun was extremely dissatisfied with the progress. So many people couldn't take down one person? His warhorse is still full of vigor and vitality? The general said. It's not that we are incompetent. It's because the enemy is too evil. Not to mention Jiang Pingji, the horse she was riding was evil. No matter how many people tried to stab the horse with their spears, they always hit an invisible but real barrier and couldn't move an inch. The soldiers were confused by the change. While they were in a daze, the general on the horse used his iron whip to sweep away the spears or directly hit the heads of the soldiers who surrounded him. It was not an exaggeration. The strength of the iron whip could really break the neck and send the head flying. The deputy general didn't even know how to describe how bloody and violent the scene was. Fanchen said, "It's really Lu Shi. No matter what price we have to pay, we can't let this person live." The general sighed secretly and cupped his hands in acknowledgement. In order to arouse the fighting spirit of his soldiers, he directly called out Jiang Pengji's identity. As the saying goes, brave men are bound to be rewarded with a great reward. Under Fan Chen's instruction, the general showed the reward. This person is Lu Shi, the feudal lord. Whoever can take his head will be rewarded with 100,000 taels of gold and a title of nobility. 100,000 taels of gold? A title of nobility? The high reward made the eyes of the timid soldiers red. One by one, they rushed forward without a care for their lives. They were soldiers who hung their heads on their waistbands. There was no tomorrow, and they didn't know when they would be able to stand out. Now that there was an opportunity in front of them, they had to fight for it even if it meant risking their lives. Maybe they could steal Jiang Pengji's head. Now that he had obtained the head, he would be rewarded with 100,000 gold coins and a noble title. He would only need to enjoy it for the rest of his life. When Jiang Pengji's identity was exposed, Bai Ning and the other two hurriedly sent soldiers to escort Jiang Pengji to retreat, but their lord refused. "A bunch of trash wants my head." Jiang Pengji felt humiliated, not to mention a group of ordinary soldiers. Even her colleagues from her previous life did not have the confidence to take her head. Did they really think that her head was made of paper, and that anyone could covet it? You're courting death. Jiang Pengji alone attracted half of the enemy's firepower. The enemy archers aimed at her in white, who was under her crotch. Fanchen felt that Jiang Pengji deserved to die, but he did not know that Jiang Pengji was a ghost. Even the king of hell did not dare to take her life. The rain of arrows came from all directions. Those that could be shot down would be shot down, and those that couldn't be shot down would be blocked by the spiritual domain. She did not have to worry even if the enemy rushed over. Sending someone's head from 1,000 miles away, the gift was light, but the sentiment was heavy. How could she not accept it? Bai Ning, who was seriously injured, was ordered by Jiang Pengji to command and dispatch. He could not easily go forward. He could only listen to the soldiers' battle reports. Through a few words, he knew what shocking feat his lord had done. The enemy's corpses around her could pile up into a small hill. Qin Gong's injuries were relatively light, so he could lead the troops to support Jiang Pengji. "I have to inform the military counselors about this when I get back." He was not a person who liked to snitch, but he really could not stand his lord running around with the enemy. If Qiguan Rang and the others were there, Jiang Pengji would not dare to be so brazen. They were not there, and Qin Gong and Bai Ning could not suppress her. Even if his lord bore a grudge, Qin Gong still had to snitch. The night was dark. The two armies were fighting to the death. Almost everyone had lost their minds. A soldier had just stabbed an enemy to death, but in the next second, the enemy's blade pierced him full of holes. While the battle here was in a stalemate, the killing at Zhangjiang Pass was even more tragic. Wei Yong had obviously come prepared this time. Even though Wei Ci and the others had already thought of ways to destroy more than 50 of their catapults, there were still brand new catapults pushed up by the soldiers to replace those that had been smashed to pieces. The firepower was fierce, and the attack did not decrease. It was very dangerous on the city wall. Qiguan Rang and the others could only retreat to command, so as to avoid being accidentally injured by the catapults. My lord is very right about one thing. The Nie family is rich and powerful. We are really inferior to them. Qiguan Rang's newly made feather fan had long been burnt to a crisp. His sleeves were also burned with a few holes. He looked very pathetic. Wei Xiai smiled bitterly when he heard that. The Nie family was indeed rich and powerful. Old Master Sun Wen said with a gloomy expression, "They are determined to break through Zhanjiang Pass. If this situation continues, I'm afraid we won't be able to defend it. It was not that our army was not strong enough. It was just that the enemy's numbers and firepower exceeded the limits of what we could withstand. In this siege, the losses of both sides were more tragic than the previous one. If it was in the past, Wei Yong would have long retreated in the face of such a huge loss. But this time, it was as if he had taken the wrong medicine and was unforgiving." Qiguan Rang said. "Wei Yong doesn't feel bad about such a huge loss." Wei Xiai said, "According to his character, he won't easily withdraw his troops at this time. Of course it's best not to withdraw either." Qiguan Rang asked Wei Xiai with his eyes. Wei Xiai said, "My lord is still outside Zhanjiang Pass. If eldest brother knows, he will definitely send troops back to help. My lord will be in danger. If Zhanjiang Pass was lost, it was lost. They could fight back sooner or later. But if my lord was gone, then it was really irreversible." Qiguan Rang sighed secretly. His lord was such a worrisome person. At this time, Old Master Sun Wen said, "If we can't defend it, we might as well retreat to Erdeo City." Wei Xiai asked, "Zidao means to let go of Zhanjiang Pass? If my lord finds out, she will definitely be furious." Sun Wen said, "This is called advancing by retreating." Jiang Pingji knew that the Nie family was difficult to deal with, so she was unusually cautious when defending. Not only did they build a barbican, but they also built a temporary city wall to cushion the enemy's troops. Sun Wen said, "The area outside the city wall of Zhanjiang Pass is controlled by the enemy. It's also quite convenient for them to transport catapults and scaling ladders without any obstruction. But it's a burden for our army. It's better to let go of the city wall and retreat to Erdeo City. The distance between Guaman Pass and Erdeo City is quite far. If the enemy wants to attack Erdeo City, they can only go through the city gate. Although the city gate is tall and wide, there are tens of thousands of enemies. It's impossible for all of them to rush in at once. It'll take even more time to transport ladders, catapults, and other supplies in." The newly built Erdeo City's defensive ability was slightly weaker, but it could still cushion the enemy's troops and buy time for their own side. If the enemy wanted to rush in, they would definitely disrupt the army's formation. It might even lead to the predicament of the reinforcements not being able to arrive in time. Because of the city gate, the enemy's catapults could not reach Erdeo City in time, imperceptibly weakening the enemy's combat power. Sometimes a strategic retreat was also to lure the enemy into taking the bait. Chapter 1536. Wei Xiai looked hesitant. Even if he knew that Old Master Sun Wen's plan was feasible, there were too many variables. Since ancient times, how many fake retreats had become real collapses because of unforeseen events? Soldiers did not know the plans of their superiors. They only knew that if they were defeated by the enemy and fled, it would definitely affect the overall morale. Morale was something that could not be seen or touched, but it was too useful on the battlefield. With high morale, even rookies could chase elites around. With low morale, even the best elites could not defeat the enemy's grassroots. Wei Xiai was not against Old Master Sun Wen's plan. He just wanted to minimize the negative impact of a retreat. Seeing this, Qiguan Rang chose a compromise. "Let me command here to resist for a while. The two of you go to Erdeo City to prepare for the enemy," Qiguan Rang said decisively. "If we retreat at the last minute, the soldiers will think that we are no match for the Nya army. If we make arrangements in advance, the impact of the retreat should be minimized." Of course, Wei Xiai could not agree to leave Qiguan Rang alone to command. Even with the help of several generals, he could not take care of the entire battle situation alone. At this moment, they were already stretched thin. If Wei Xiai and Sun Wen left, Qiguan Rang would be under considerable pressure. Qiguan Rang shook his head and said, "There's no time to lose. Go and prepare as soon as possible." Looking at the situation, the city gate can still hold for a quarter of an hour. Wei Xiai and Old Master Sun Wen looked at each other. and did not continue to object. This was not the time to waste time. Any delay would cost countless lives. Someone. Shiguan Rang's eyes darkened. He summoned the soldiers and said, "Immediately send people to pile the extra stones at the entrance of the city gate." The enemy's attack was fierce. Even though the soldiers on the city gate had tried their best to kill the enemy soldiers carrying the siege logs, there would be another batch after they were killed. The enemy tried their best to cover them. When dozens of people carried the siege logs and hit the city gate, Shiguan Rang could feel the ground tremble slightly under his feet. Even though the main materials of the city gate were thick solid wood, bronze and fine iron, it could not withstand such violent ravages. Since the city gate would be breached sooner or later, it was better to seize the time to block the enemy. Military counselor, if the city gate is blocked. The general looked hesitant. He was one of the people who knew that his lord had led troops to attack the enemy at night. If the entrance was blocked, not only would it hinder the enemy, but it would also hinder the return of his lord. Shiguan Rang said coldly, "You only need to obey military orders, and not question them in front of the battlefield. I know what to do in an emergency." The general cupped his fists and said, "Yes, sir." After saying that, he immediately ordered his men to use a portion of the stones to block the entrance of the city. The entrance to the city was blocked. Even if the enemy continued to use their siege weapons to break open the city gate, it would not be easy for them to charge into Zhangjiang Pass. Calculating, they should be able to delay for a while. Why are the two military counselors back? Could it be? Feng Yi was arranging for the soldiers to send the city defense equipment to the front line. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Wei Ci and the other man rushing over. Her heart thumped. Wei Ci raised his hand to stop Feng Yi from speaking. He said briefly, "The frontline city gate has not fallen." Feng Yi's eyes were filled with worry. Even though they were so far away, he could still hear what was happening in Yidao City. He was constantly on tenterhooks, but there was a limit to what he could do. He could only try his best to do what he could. While busy, he enriched himself and gained experience. Sun Wen asked, "Where's Lan Lan?" Feng Yi said, "There are too many wounded soldiers sent over from the front line. To prevent chaos, Sun Lan is helping to direct the transfer of the wounded soldiers to the casualty barracks." When the two armies fought, the number of soldiers who died on the spot was not high. Most of the soldiers died because they were not treated in time. Jiang Pingji was clear about this. Naturally, she had to take measures to reduce the death rate. For this purpose, she even specially set up a combat medical battalion. The soldiers of this battalion had to learn a certain amount of first aid knowledge. They also had to learn combat skills from ordinary soldiers. Their duty was to specifically transfer the wounded soldiers who had lost their combat ability, but were not yet dead. Their medical knowledge did not have to be better than the military doctors in the casualty barracks, but they had to know how to minimize the secondary damage of the wounded soldiers when transferring them. Their combat skills did not have to be better than the combat troops, but they had to learn how to protect themselves. The soldiers of this battalion were basically between the logistical medical unit and the frontline combat troops. Although they were not as good as the top, they were not weaker than the bottom. In a sense, they were more important. The number of wounded soldiers at the front line increased. The transfer was disorderly. Sun Lan took the initiative to ask for help. When Sun Wen heard this, he felt gratified and a little melancholy at the same time. He was also a person who had experienced great storms. Naturally, he knew what kind of place the logistical medical unit was. It looked like it was at the rear, but the scene was no less than hell on earth. In the past, Sun Lan had not even seen a chicken being slaughtered. He did not know if he could bear to see it all of a sudden. Old Master Sun Wen valued his grandson too much, so he subconsciously treated Sun Lan as a child. He did not know that his grandson had already grown up. War was the best way to train people. At first, Sun Lan helped to command and dispatch. Later, when he saw that there were not enough people, he also helped to carry stretchers and wounded soldiers. He went back and forth dozens, hundreds of times. The clothes on his shoulders were torn by the hemp ropes. The flesh on his shoulders and palms were rubbed until there were bloody blisters. His originally clean clothes were also dyed red by the blood of the wounded soldiers. From afar, he looked like a bloody man. There was more determination between his brows. How could one still see his past appearance? He happened to hear the news that the front line was about to retreat. He suddenly felt as if he was struck by lightning. It was as if his soul was about to leave his body. Grandfather Sun Wen was at the front line. How was he now? Grandfather. Sun Lan looked at the blazing flames on the horizon. His heart almost twisted into a ball. However, he had no time to inquire about his grandfather's news. He could only grit his teeth and suppress all his worries. The huge medical unit was full of wounded soldiers. Some were lucky enough to get stretchers or straw mats. Most of the soldiers could only lie on the ground. Those with less serious injuries leaned against each other to reduce the space they occupied. Because the female military doctors were short of manpower, the medical supplies were also somewhat stretched. Many soldiers only had time to hastily clean their wounds, stitch them up and bandage them. The rest was up to fate. The seemingly crude medical methods were very comprehensive in this era. Overall, the death rate of the soldiers under Jiang Pingji's command was also the lowest in the same period. Listening to the cries of the wounded soldiers, Sun Lan took a deep breath. He suddenly had an unprecedented impulse. However, he quickly shook the thought out of his mind. Chapter 1537. There were many people in the Nye clan. The old master had given birth to 5 sons in one go, and the 5 sons had many children. By the time Nye Qing's father's generation had married and had children, the number of relatives Nye Qing had could be measured in hundreds, and he had more cousins than he could remember. Fortunately, Nye Qing did not have face blindness and had a good memory. Otherwise, he wouldn't have remembered. This year, at the clan gathering, Nye Qing followed behind his father Nye Liang. His watery eyes couldn't help but look around. Nye Liang knew his son couldn't sit still. He smiled. If it's boring, let the servant girls take you to the side to play with your brothers and sisters. Nye Qing blushed and lowered his head, not daring to look at his father's teasing expression. At that time, Nye Liang had yet to shine. He was like a luminous pearl, bright but not eye-catching. He didn't have a strong presence. This caused Nye Qing's status to be neither high nor low. Even so, the servant girls in the clan didn't dare to slight him and carefully served him. Nye Qing rested for a while in the side room. From the corner of his eyes, he saw a few children of the clan surrounding someone in the garden. What are you doing? Nye Qing was far away and couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see the children shrunk their shoulders, their faces full of grievance. The group of young Langjuns saw Nye Qing come over, and immediately showed displeased expressions. I'm just having a chat with my brothers. The one who said this was the tallest Langjun. Nye Qing recognized him. He was the eldest grandson of the Nye family's first branch. So it's like this. I misunderstood. Please forgive me, cousin. As Nye Qing finished, he beckoned to the boy of the same age who was surrounded. Come here, the elders are looking for you. The servant girls looked for you for a long time, and thought you were lost. Come with me. The moment he said this, the eldest grandson's face darkened. But Nye Qing's expression was natural, and he couldn't question him. He could only watch as Nye Qing took Nye Yang away. Were they bullying you just now? He had a good memory, and faintly remembered that this harmless rabbit-like Langjun was his uncle's child. Nye Yang pinched his fingers and nodded. His eyes were still red, making him look even more like a rabbit. Why did they bully you? Cousin's words don't make sense. I was bullied by those tall ones. Shouldn't you be asking me why? Why are you asking me instead? Nye Yang pouted in dissatisfaction. Realizing that he had gone too far, he awkwardly corrected himself. This little brother didn't mean to talk back. It's just that things haven't been going well recently, and they're very annoyed. This little brother. I hope cousin brother can forgive me. Nye Qing had a good temper, and he could also see that Nye Yang's situation was not very good, so naturally he would not vent his anger on him. The reason why I'm asking you is because you're the only one beside me. If they're here, I'll go ask them. Nye Yang's face turned red in embarrassment. He felt apologetic for his antisocial behavior. It's nothing much. When I was in the family school, They were criticized by the teacher for their homework. Little brother came in late, but he did better than them, so they were jealous. Nieyong sighed and said in an old-fashioned tone, "Those who don't attract jealousy are mediocre. I won't argue with them." Nieching laughed heartily. It was his first time seeing such an interesting cousin. Those who don't attract jealousy are mediocre. These words really make sense. Nieyong continued. Other than this, it probably has something to do with my looks. They always say that I look too much like a girl, and am easy to bully. Even if he was a child from a landowning household, he was still a child. When it came to bullying others, any reason could be a reason. Nieyang's father liked women, and he had children one after another. Although Nieyong was the son of the first wife, he was not valued. For a child who was not valued even by his own father, how much support could he have in the complicated environment of the family school? As long as it wasn't a big deal, the headmaster wouldn't care if it was a small fight. Nieching laughed. I see that you have a sharp tongue. You don't look like someone easy to bully. Nieyang's eyes widened. He looked even more innocent and easy to bully. Nieching said, I'll find a chance to talk to the family school's teacher. The family school is a place to study, and not a place for a bunch of landowning households to bully the weak and fight. As for you, if you're wrong, you can tell me. I'll support you. Nieyong did not expect that he could find a backer. But why? This was the first time he and Nieching had met. He was not used to the other party being so intimate right from the start. One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Later, it was proven that Nieching's temperament was like this. It was a proper central air conditioner, but this one took special care of Nieyong. Thank you, big brother. Nieyong was only half a year younger than Nieching, but the two of them were half a head apart. Nieching thought to himself, could it be that his uncle had deducted Nieyang's rations, causing this younger cousin to be so skinny and small? No wonder he was bullied by others. Perhaps it was fate. Although the two of them were not blood-related brothers, they got along well. Not long after, they were like one person. Nieyang's good days did not last long. He was secretly pushed into the pond and choked a few times. That night he caught a cold. When Nieching heard the news, he rushed over to see him. Nieyong was so sick that his entire face was red. Big brother, Nieching said. What is it? Nieyong stammered. Last night when I fell into the water, I definitely did not slip and accidentally. Someone pushed me from behind. Nieching said, Big brother knows. I will definitely support you. Nieyong was sick, and the more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. He was not a good swimmer, and the pond was quite deep, not even above his head. Last night, he really thought that he was going to drown. Why did these people bully him? Nieyang's eyes showed some confusion, but then they became determined. Because he had no power or influence, his father did not love him, and his mother did not love him. He did not have the ability to protect himself, so they bullied him. Although Nieching treated him well, he could not prevent him from being pushed into the pond and almost drowning. To put it bluntly, he still had to rely on himself to climb up until no one dared to bully him anymore. As he thought of this, a strange light laugh suddenly rang in his mind. You are an interesting person. You have a high level of comprehension. Nieyang's body trembled, his face pale. He was so scared that his limbs turned cold. Even the thick bedding could not give him a sense of security. Who are you? I am the system. You don't have to ask directly. Just ask in your heart. I can hear you, the system said. Just now, you said that you want to rely on your own ability to climb up until no one dares to bully you, right? This goal is a little difficult to achieve. Nieyong said. It has nothing to do with you. You demon, you are still pretending to be mysterious. I do not need to pretend to be mysterious, because I am a demon in the eyes of you mortals. The system laughed. Your personality is very much in line with my criteria for choosing a host. Young man, if you only rely on yourself, you will have to suffer a lot in the future. Why don't you become my host? My power will be yours to use. To tell you the truth, I am the Emperor growth system. My hosts are all people with Emperor's Qi, and have the potential to rule the world. Within the borders of Zhongzhou, your Emperor's Qi is the thickest. It can be seen that the heavens intend for you to stand out in this chaotic world. Nonsense. The world is at peace now. How can there be chaos? If the host does not believe me, just wait and see. Chapter 1538. Although they were prepared to retreat from Secondary Path City, they were not retreating mindlessly. Qiguanrang knew this very well. They had to plan it slowly and act slowly. They had to let the enemy not notice, and let their own soldiers know that retreat was not a rout, but a strategic arrangement. Because they were cautious enough, the Nia army did not suspect anything. What's the situation at the front? Wei Yong was always paying attention to the battle. Seeing the tragic situation, even he could not help but frown, leaving a mark between his brows. He had thought that attacking Zhangjiang Pass tonight would give them an advantage and convenience, but he did not expect the enemy to be so stubborn. If the two armies continued to be in a stalemate, the losses on both sides would multiply. The enemy is already showing signs of defeat. They will most likely not be able to hold on. The general's serious face finally showed some joy, and his tone became lighter. The resistance now is not as strong as at the beginning, and their morale is getting lower. They will be defeated sooner or later. Wei Yong pinched his brows, and his tightly pursed lips almost became a straight line. Those who were not familiar with him knew that he was in a bad mood. The general asked him fearfully, "Military advisor, is there anything wrong?" Wei Yong said coldly, "Our army had the advantage of a sneak attack, and it took a long time for the enemy to show signs of defeat. What is there to be happy about?" After hearing this, the general was embarrassed. However, he was dark, and the night was dark, so others could not see it. "I was wrong." Wei Yong changed the topic. "Lu Shi is our strong enemy, so it is expected that he has such strength." How to show his strength? Naturally, it was to be stronger than a strong enemy. If Zhangjiang Pass was as weak as paper, the late Lord Nieliang would not have died in peace. The Nia army at the foot of the city persevered in setting up ladders on the city wall. The catapult constantly used burning fireballs to attack the enemy behind the wall, and at the same time, provided cover for the soldiers climbing the ladders. At the same time, the soldiers at the city gate also carried heavy battering rams against the city gate. Their cheeks were red, and they gritted their teeth. The veins on their foreheads were bulging, and their clothes were drenched in sweat. They shouted a battle cry and exerted force at the same time. Even though Zhangjiang Pass's gate was sturdy, it was now cracked. Seeing the crack, everyone was greatly encouraged, as if victory was right in front of them. They worked even harder. When the sound of the crack on the city gate expanding reached his ears, it was like the sound of nature. With a loud bang, the city gate was completely blasted open. Through the crack, everyone could see the rocks blocking the entrance of the city, and they were almost dumbfounded. It would take time to clear the rocks, and the number of soldiers climbing the ladders was limited, so they could not pose much of a threat. Qiguanrang gave the order to retreat to Erdeo City. With the obstruction of the city walls and the holes in the city, there were not many pursuers. Naturally, there were not many casualties. The general of the Nia army passed on the news to Wei Yong. Wei Yong's expression did not change, as if he had already expected this. "It doesn't matter. Let's clear the rocks and rest for a while before chasing after them." The general was dissatisfied. "Our army's morale is at its peak. At this time, we should completely defeat the enemy in one go." Wei Yong said coldly, "The city's tunnels have been completely sealed off by the enemy. May I ask how the general is going to dispatch a large number of elites and supplies to kill the enemy in such a short time?" He was afraid that he would be killed by the enemy as soon as he caught up. Sharpening the knife will not delay the work of cutting firewood. Don't tell me that general doesn't even understand this common sense? For them to be able to pry open the gates of Zhangjiang Pass, didn't they rely on the support of military supplies and their advantage in numbers? In terms of the quality of their soldiers, they did not have an advantage. Using one's weakness to attack the enemy's strength, water must have gotten into their brains. But the general did not agree with Wei Yong's opinion. When Nieliang was still alive, he had not liked Wei Yong very much. He admitted that Wei Yong was outstanding. If he did not have any ability, Nie Liang would not have thought so highly of him. However, there was a good saying, man proposes but God disposes. So what if this group of strategists had the ability to scheme and scheme? There was a large discrepancy between actual operations and theoretical assumptions. Marching and fighting a war could not be done by relying on armchair strategies. They had to take into account the changes on the battlefield and make targeted adjustments at the right time. Wei Yong was afraid of the slightest thing in battle. He felt angry just looking at him. Now he had even pushed away a great opportunity. What did he want? Thinking of this, the general felt even more depressed. Wei Yong was a strategist. It was enough that he was responsible for planning, but he was interfering with the general's work. Many of Nie Liang's old officials felt that Wei Yong wanted to monopolize power and make the new Lord Nie Qing a figurehead. The general did not think so at first, but seeing Wei Yong's current actions, he could not help but waver. He said, "The enemy has been routed and the army's morale is in chaos. This general thinks that we should follow up our victory and pursue them, not giving them any chance to breathe. The strategist thinks too much. Instead, he attends to one thing and loses sight of another, delaying the opportunity." When it comes to marching and fighting a war, this general boasts that he is not much worse than the strategist. Wei Yong could not help but sneer. He said, "General, do you think that the elites under Lu Shi's command will be routed so easily?" Nie Liang had led the troops to feign an attack on Zhangjiang Pass. Although not all the elites had been dispatched, it had been a difficult battle. The previous lord had always taken the enemy seriously. After this battle, he was even more alert. That was a true elite force, not a grassroots team. They would not collapse after a single defeat. This person in front of him was too inexperienced. Did he really think that Jiang Pingji was an enemy that he had fought before? The general said angrily, "Strategist, don't diminish your own prestige and boost the morale of others." Wei Yong's eyes turned cold. He said coldly, "Does the general want to disobey military orders?" The general was also loyal to the Nie family, but he had his own thoughts. He disapproved of Wei Yong's actions. He said, "Strategist, don't forget that in terms of responsibilities, you are in charge of the civil, and I am in charge of the military. Although the strategist can intervene in the matter of deploying troops, it is not something that you can decide on your own." As a strategist, Wei Yong had a certain amount of military power, but when it came to truly haggling, he was still a civilian and could not suppress the other. If Fan Chen or the young master Nie Qing were here, he naturally would not be afraid. If he was alone, it would be somewhat troublesome. If the general insists on doing so, I have nothing to say. I only have one thing to say. If we lead the troops to pursue and cause the battle to fail, will the general be willing to take responsibility? The general snorted and said heroically, "I will be punished according to military law. I will not have any resentment." With that, he flipped over and mounted his horse. Wei Yong looked at him with a headache. He could not deny the general's loyalty to the Nie family, but the two of them had different opinions. It was inevitable that the conflict would increase. Seeing this, the generals on Wei Yong's side were extremely worried. "Strategist, what should we do now? We can't really ask the general to walk into the enemy's trap, right?" The military strategist's talent was repeatedly affirmed by the previous Lord Nie Liang. The enemy was also so cunning. It was definitely not wrong to be more cautious. Wei Yong said coldly, "It doesn't matter. Anyway, we won't lose many people. Let him suffer." Chapter 1539. The deputy general could not bear it, but there was nothing he could do. Wei Yong said, "If we don't make him give up, there will be more conflicts in the future. It's better to take the opportunity to break his spirit and make him more clear-headed. But if that's the case, our army will definitely suffer losses." Wei Yong said coldly, "Do you think losing hundreds or thousands of people this time will teach him a lesson, or losing tens of thousands of the entire army next time?" The deputy general understood these principles, but Wei Yong's decisive and calm approach still made him feel uncomfortable. If only the late Lord Nie Liang was still here, this kind of thing would not have happened. Although everyone had conflicts, They did not dare to bring their personal grievances to the surface. Now that the situation was like this, they wondered if the late lord would be angry if he knew. Most likely he would. When the late lord was still here. When was the military advisor Wei Yong ever questioned like this, and even used his power to oppress others? The deputy general said, "What if the general still stubbornly refuses to repent, and instead holds a grudge against the military advisor?" Wei Yong said, "Although that person is bossy and willful, he is not an unreasonable person. Give him a lesson, and he will listen to you." Some people were just stubborn. If they did not throw the truth in the other party's face, they would stubbornly walk a dark path to the end. Reality proved that some people needed to be taught a lesson. They would only know that they were wrong when they were slapped in the face. Although Qiguan Rang and the others had retreated, there were no signs of defeat. Their retreat was also orderly. Whether it was advancing or retreating, they were at ease. The general sent troops to chase after them. They ate as many as they sent. They killed thousands of enemies one after another, and the army's morale was greatly boosted. TSK. I heard Zixiao say that Wei Yong was a very cautious person and would not easily take the bait. Why is he so reckless now? Qiguan Rang knew that Wei Yong would not immediately send troops to chase after them, so he was very relaxed when he retreated. He never expected that he would miscalculate. If not for the fact that the city entrance was still blocked, the enemy could only climb the ladder to the city wall. How could there be so few enemies chasing after them? Wei Yong underestimated us. He dared to chase after us with so few pursuers. Did he really think that our army would be defeated so badly after retreating? If the army completely lost the will to fight, thousands of pursuers could indeed kill them. For example, his lord had fought in front of the battlefield and became famous in one battle. The arrival of the miracle had shocked the enemy and destroyed their remaining fighting spirit. This kind of enemy was either so stupid that they didn't even dare to run, or they only cared about running and didn't know how to resist. Thieves were easy to kill. However, when Qiguan Rang examined himself, he did not think that he met the above criteria. "Counselor, maybe he's just being careless." The young general who was guarding Qiguan Rang interrupted with a smile. Qiguan Rang frowned slightly. "It's not to the extent of being careless. Do you think our military counselor Wei Zixiao will get carried away and become careless? As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Wei Ci valued his eldest brother Wei Qiu so much. The latter must have something special about him, and would not make mistakes easily, let alone such a low-level mistake. Qiguan Rang was more inclined to the other theory than being careless. Their old lord Nie Liang has passed away, and the new lord Nie Qing has returned to Zhongzhou. Without a leader at the front line, I'm afraid. The young general asked curiously. Afraid of what? Qiguan Rang smiled and said, I'm afraid that someone has a disagreement with Wei Qiu and is in conflict. The young general said, I heard that Wei Qiu's position in the Nie army is not low, and he has military power in his hands. Who can overpower him? Qiguan Rang said, Why not? Wei Qiu has military power, but he doesn't have a monopoly. The young general said proudly, These things will not happen in the Lord's hands. The Lord has a strong temperament and acts fairly. It is indeed not easy to happen, but nothing is absolute. Qiguan Rang knew very well that it was not that there were no conflicts in his lord's camp, but that she did not bring them to the surface. If there were conflicts of interests and standpoints in the future, they would probably fight more fiercely than he imagined. If the Lord did not reveal everything to him, he was afraid that he would always be on guard against Wei Ci, and only plan to get rid of him when necessary. So what if Wei Ci was the Lord's man? When it came to politics, this identity would only hasten Wei Ci's death. Qiguan Rang would not be merciful just because Wei Ci was the Lord's man. At most, he would let Wei Ci die with dignity and leave his corpse intact. The young general asked curiously, Is there a conflict? This general's eyesight is poor, so I did not notice that the generals and the military counselor are getting along very well. Qiguan Rang was speechless. How did the conflict disappear? The conflict between the gentry and the poor was a conflict that could not be ignored. There were not many gentry in the Lord's camp, but it was not that there were none. When the world was slightly more stable, and there were many things waiting to be done, it was inevitable that the gentry would be put to good use. Who asked the gentry to have so many gentry? The foundation of the poor was still too shallow. In the beginning, they could still fight evenly with the gentry by relying on their achievements in founding the country. As time went on, the disadvantage of the poor with a shallow foundation became more obvious. They would either be assimilated by the gentry and become a new gentry, or they would fall and never have a chance to make a comeback. For the gentry to survive for so many years, their means of survival were not comparable to those of the poor. He was deep in thought. The young general smiled and said, "The Lord is so wise. Even if there is a conflict, she will nip it in the bud." Qiguanrang could not help but laugh. His Lord was really deified. Yes, the Lord is the child of providence. There is nothing she can't do. Wei Xi's brainwashing was really scary. A good seedling had been brainwashed into a brainless fanboy. General Nie Jun caught up and found that the enemy had retreated calmly and did not look as pathetic as he had imagined. His face immediately burned. Not only was he ashamed, but he was also angry at being played by the enemy. "You brats, such despicable behavior is really infuriating." The general was a person who cared about his reputation. He had just dissed Wei Yong without thinking, and now he was slapped in the face by the enemy. When Wei Yong caught up with the soldiers, he did not dare to look at the other party's face. Fortunately, Wei Yong was magnanimous and did not deliberately use this to humiliate him. The two of them tacitly brushed this matter aside. Wei Yong said, "Retreat 1 kilometer with the troops first. We will attack when the supplies are ready." The general subconsciously wanted to refute, but he had learned his lesson and did not want to be slapped in the face again in such a short time. "We will listen to the military counselor's arrangements." Many soldiers did not understand Wei Yong's decision to retreat 2 kilometers. They had won a small battle. Why should they give up the fat meat in their mouths and choose to retreat? This was a classic case of information stagnation. The people below did not understand the orders of their superiors. Some would blindly follow, but there were also people who were confused and even misunderstood. Why are they retreating? Retreating to Erdeo City. They could not help but feel puzzled when they saw the enemy retreat. Qiguanrang smiled and said, "Of course they have to retreat. Why don't we wait for our army to send out troops?" The enemy's supplies did not keep up. At this time, they had to retreat and stabilize the situation. If they continued to wait, they would capsize. Old Master Sun Wen's face was cold as he asked Qiguanrang, "Is it possible now?" Chapter 1540. There was also a need to pay attention to the timing of the attack. If it was too early, it would not be enough. And if it was too late, it would be easy to lose the best opportunity. Qiguanrang was experienced and could control the timing. Not to mention that he had Wei Ci and Old Man Sun Wen by his side. Be vigilant, the enemy is most likely going to attack. Wei Yong's face was solemn. "Counselor, you said they will attack now?" The general was shocked at first, but he quickly understood. He grasped the weapon in his hand tightly and said in a thunderous voice, "Counselor, don't worry. If they dare to attack, we will make sure that they do not return." Wei Yong said, "Of course they will attack. Otherwise, when our supplies are in place, they will not be able to defend themselves, and their morale will collapse." A retreat could appease the soldiers and ensure that their morale would not be broken and their formation would not be disrupted. If there was another retreat, they would be in a passive position. Wei Yong had reason to believe that this was Qiguanrang's last chance to attack. As expected, there was movement in Erdeo City. Several city gates opened and soldiers poured out like a tide. The cavalry and chariots were at the forefront. They were extremely fast and closed the distance between them in no time. It looked like they were about to charge. Wei Yong ordered the archers to face the enemy and set up the barricade posts to obstruct the enemy cavalry's attack as much as possible. Then he ordered the archers to attack with arrows. The cavalry had always been a headache for the feudal lords, not to mention that Jiang Pengji had both heavy and light cavalry. Both had their own strengths and were difficult to coordinate. The heavy cavalry collided and cut the formation, while the light cavalry used their speed to outflank the enemy. It was an invincible combination. Although the barricade posts could cause some trouble for the cavalry, they were not fatal. Jiang Pingji's heavy cavalry used heavy horses. Both the men and horses were covered in heavy armor. The craftsmanship of the armor had been improved by her several times. There was almost no weakness on the armor. The joints were hidden, and the armor was as thick as half a knuckle. Unless the enemy archers had superb archery skills and could aim at the eyes of the men or horses from a long distance, it was difficult to cause fatal damage to them. The armor was either bronze or refined iron. How could ordinary arrows break through such heavy defense? In Jiang Pingji's words, the heavy cavalry were a group of iron turtles. They had no other shortcomings except for their slow speed. When thousands of heavy cavalry charged together, they could even send the barricade posts flying. However, the heavy cavalry also had obvious weaknesses. Their durability was extremely poor, their endurance was worrying, and their speed was also slow. If he was entangled by the enemy, he would be like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. On the other hand, light cavalry sacrificed their defense in exchange for speed. They came and went like the wind, and their mobility was the best-known troop type. Wei Yong had investigated Jiang Pingji, so he naturally knew about the trump card troops under her command. Seeing that even the light and heavy cavalry had come out, he knew that Qiguan Rang and the others intended to have a showdown with him. Therefore, he did not dare to act rashly. He was in charge of dispatching and commanding, but the battlefield was ever-changing. Many times, it still depended on the performance of the commander. Seeing that the heavy cavalry was armed to the teeth, General Nia immediately changed tactics. Chop the horse's legs and poke the horse's eyes. The general was experienced in dealing with cavalrymen. Cavalrymen were scary, but as long as they couldn't charge or move after entering the formation, they wouldn't be much of a threat. Lasso, remember to aim at the arms and heads of the enemy cavalrymen. The heavy cavalry on horseback was terrifying, but those who were dragged off horseback were not so great. Wearing such heavy armor to fight, just the armor alone would consume most of their strength. Once the heavy cavalry fell off their horses, they would lose their advantage in speed and strength, making it even easier for them to die. Of course, this was a theoretical tactic. There was always a huge gap between actual operation and theoretical knowledge. The enemy heavy cavalry did not fight alone, but in groups. The heavy cavalry, together with their horses, weighed about 800 to 1,000 kilograms, while the Asian elephants weighed only 3 to 5 tons. The heavy cavalry launched an attack at the same time, ignoring the enemy's defensive posts and charging into the enemy's formation against the rain of arrows. How could a few dozen soldiers stop them? They crossed the defensive posts and charged into the crowd. The unlucky guy who bore the brunt of the impact had his sternum broken, his head split open, and he could not be more dead. The Zanmadeo in the hands of the heavy cavalry was also specially made. The blade was wide, the handle was extremely long, and the blade was sharp. Chopping off a person's head was like cutting tofu. More than 1,000 heavy cavalry seemed to have barged into no man's land. They ignored the drizzle of obstacles along the way. The heavy cavalry's performance was so outstanding, the light cavalry was not willing to fall behind. The most annoying thing about cavalry, especially light cavalry, was that they would attack when they wanted to, but by the time you wanted to retaliate, they had already run far away. How could a two-legged person compare to a four-legged horse? Moreover, it was a fast-moving live target that was difficult to aim at. Archery was not so easy to practice. Those godly archers who could shoot with 100% accuracy could not be ordinary archers their entire lives. Most of the time, the role of an archer was to shoot arrows in the direction of the enemy and cause indiscriminate damage through a large area of arrow rain. If one arrow could not hit its target, then a few more would be shot. A blind cat could always find a dead mouse, and the arrows that were shot could also hit the enemy. Qiguan Rang sent the heavy cavalry to lead the attack, not to use them as cannon fodder to fight the enemy. They were the most valuable troops under the Lord's command. Men could eat, but horses could eat even more. Every qualified cavalry battalion soldier was built with money and rice. The main purpose of the cavalry going into battle was to use them to oppress the enemy in terms of momentum and force them into confusion. At the same time, it was to buy time for the follow-up troops, to make the enemy unable to stabilize their position and delay the main force until the main force rushed over. However, they did not only have cavalry. The Nie family was even wealthier than Jiang Pingji. The scale of the cavalry that they trained was not small. Qiguan Reng saw that the enemy had stabilized their position and began to counterattack. He immediately ordered the cavalry to return to the formation to reduce losses as much as possible. The light cavalry stood guard and obstructed the enemy's pursuit. The heavy cavalry was responsible for covering the return of the formation. It would be heartbreaking to lose even a few of these gold ingots. Kill. Wei Yong saw the situation, and his expression was extremely cold. At this point in the fierce battle, the sky slowly turned white. The two armies fought for a whole night, but both sides were in high spirits. As soon as the battle began, they were inseparable and fought to the death. The Nie army's morale was high because of a small victory. Jiang Pingji's troops were full of confidence. They killed until their eyes were red. At the same time, Jiang Pingji and the rest led the remaining troops to a draw with the troops led by Fan Chen. Fan Chen's troops were originally 2 times larger than theirs, but now they were tied by her. Uffed! Jiang Pingji spat out a mouthful of blood and revealed a sinister smile. It was a really satisfying night of killing. In front of her were enemies, and there were heads everywhere. Most importantly, no one could beat her in killing them. I haven't killed to my heart's content in a long time. Bai Ning was also old and seriously injured. After staying up all night, he showed signs of fatigue. Hearing his lord's words, he could not help but smile bitterly. If he counted the corpses on the battlefield, he was afraid that 1/3 of them had died in the hands of his lord. No one survived under the god-slaying sword. Those who were slashed by her would die. Every slash was aimed at the enemy's vital parts. Chapter 1541. Bai Ning lamented. Isn't it a nightmare to fight an entire army alone? In this battle, they suffered heavy losses at the beginning, but their subsequent losses were not significant. The enemy was the opposite of them. They had the upper hand in the early stages, but they were defeated by their own army in the middle and later stages. No matter how Fan Chen used violence to suppress the fluctuating morale of the army, the Nie army still collapsed. He had never expected that the person who had turned the situation around was actually his lord. She had relied on violent means to forcefully beat the arrogant enemy to the ground. Initially, the enemy outnumbered them, but the lord led the soldiers to cut down the numbers on both sides. There was actually such a thing in the world. Qin Gong muttered. An ordinary person's arm would be crippled after wielding a sword for a whole night. On the other hand, my lord is still full of energy. Bai Ning echoed. She's inhuman. At that moment, they even suspected that their lord was a deity who had descended to the mortal world to play with mortals like them. Little did they know that their lord, whom they praised to the heavens, was being lectured by the old chief, who had just returned to sleep. Jiang Pingji was extremely depressed. The old chief could go back to sleep happily, but she had been fighting and killing the enemy the whole night. Even if she didn't get any credit, she had worked hard. Couldn't the old leader be merciful and give her some face? You Abba. There's really something wrong with your mentality. As the saying goes, a higher-ranking official can crush a person to death. The old chief was not only Jiang Pingji's former superior, but he had also guided and taught her. Even though she was very depressed, Jiang Pingji could only listen obediently on the surface. She yawned as she listened. You Abba. Do you really think you've completed the mission given by the Federation by killing the Sky Brain? Can you just retire after accomplishing your mission? Jiang Pingji felt a headache when she heard that. She said, What exactly are you referring to, old chief? My mentality is very normal. She really didn't know what was wrong with her, but bystanders could see things clearly. Perhaps the old chief really saw something, so she listened attentively. You Abba. You've long suspected that there was something wrong, but why did you still fall into the enemy's ambush? Jiang Pingji sneered. Didn't the old chief say that if you pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger for too long, you'll be assimilated? Remember not to make the same mistake next time. After she said that, the old chief was silent for a long time. After a while, he sent a long message to Jiang Pingji. Your Abba. That's part of the reason, but isn't the other reason that you're in a hurry? Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. What did she mean by anxious for quick results? She looked very anxious. Old chief, you're wrong to say that. When have I ever been impatient for success? If I was really in a hurry, I would have pestered you to mail me mecha, battleships, or other firearms. It's not easy to dominate the world. Let's take a step back and say that I can use my own abilities if things don't work out. But I don't have any. How can you say that I'm anxious for quick results? Jiang Pingji felt wronged. The old chief's accusation was groundless. Your Abba, you said no? Aren't you in a hurry to attack the city and settle the matter in front of you, so that you can return to the Federation? For the sake of this goal, your mentality has changed. You are far less serious than before. To put it bluntly, you have even lost the basic respect for life. You knew that something was wrong. You knew that the spiritual realm could help you investigate the enemy's situation and avoid harm. But you never thought about this. Rather than saying that you were assimilated and forgot about this ability, it's more accurate to say that you subconsciously did not intend to use it. The more Jiang Pingji listened, the more she frowned. To outsiders, she looked like she was wiping the blood off the god-slaying sword. Old chief, if you have something to say, just say it. Why do you have to beat around the bush? Your Abba. Are the lives of the soldiers under your command important to you? She was a genetic warrior. The education she received from a young age was to sacrifice everything for the overall situation, including her own life. Jiang Pingji could even sacrifice her own life. What else could she not give up? In order to achieve her goal, it was normal to sacrifice the lives of the soldiers under her command. However, Jiang Pingji said, of course it's important. Your Abba. Did you really not know that the enemy had set up an ambush, or did you take the bait even though you knew there was an ambush? Jiang Pingji's lips curled into a cold smile. What's the difference? Your Abba. Whether it's an ambush or not, you have to take the bait. Therefore, of course, you don't need to use your spiritual realm to investigate the enemy. You don't need to. Isn't it to prevent yourself from knowing the truth and alerting the enemy? You used yourself and the soldiers under your command as bait to lure the enemy. Aren't you afraid that you'll capsize if you're careless? In your plan, how many people do you plan to sacrifice to achieve this? Jiang Pingji blinked and smiled. I don't understand what you mean, old chief. Your Abba. You want to wipe out the Nye family's troops, don't you? Jiang Pingji said. I've stayed here long enough. Isn't it better to get rid of the Nye family and end the war as soon as possible? Your Abba, you finally admit it. Jiang Pingji did not comment. Not only was Wei Yong plotting against her, but she was also playing along. If Wei Yong's retreat was true, it would be best. The troops sent out could ambush the Nye camp. It would be considered a victory. If Wei Yong's retreat was a trap, what could it be? Jiang Pingji put herself in Wei Yong's shoes and roughly guessed the enemy's plan. It was no exception. They would set up an ambush to kill the troops that ambushed the Nye camp. What's more, they would arrange for an ambush to ambush Zhanjiang Pass. If they ambushed Zhanjiang Pass, Wei Yong would definitely go all out and send out all his troops. Jiang Pingji weighed the two options. Her brows had never relaxed. In the end, she decided to beat them at their own game. Regardless of whether the enemy was acting or not, she would find out after a while. She did not use her spiritual realm to investigate. Just as the old chief said, she did not think of it. Secondly, she did not plan to use it. Whether it was the enemy's scheme or not, it was all within her calculations. Except for a few people, Qin Gong and Bai Ning did not know about this plan. A secret was a secret because few people knew about it. The fewer people who knew about it, the smaller the loopholes. She could protect the lives of the two of them, but she could not guarantee the survival of the other soldiers. The old chief was angry and reprimanded her, mostly because of this. In order to achieve her goal, Jiang Pingji pushed the soldiers who did not know about it to their deaths. Old chief, I've never been a good person. The rule of genetic warriors is to achieve their goals by hook or by crook. Necessary sacrifices are inevitable, Jiang Pingji said calmly. On the whole, the Nia family has been destroyed. Our army's overall losses are smaller. If the Nia family was allowed to jump around, the two armies would fight one battle after another. The accumulated losses would be too great. It was better to gather the troops and set up a dead end for them. They would suffer a heavy setback and suffer a great loss, even though this plan would sacrifice some innocent soldiers. Your Abba. If it were the federal soldiers, would you sacrifice them without hesitation? Chapter 1542. My lord, the enemy has fled. Should we chase after them, or rescue Zhanjiang Pass? Qin Gong wiped the blood off his face and revealed a carefree expression. The battle tonight was really satisfying. Jiang Pingji looked at Zhanjiang Pass from afar. Her eyes were as deep and dark as a deep pool, containing a coldness that outsiders could not perceive. Capture the remaining soldiers. The battle at Zhanjiang Pass is probably over. Qin Gong was stunned. He did not seem to understand what Jiang Pingji meant. What did she mean by the battle at Zhanjiang Pass is probably over? Would our army, or the enemy, be victorious? He had looked in the direction of Zhanjiang Pass earlier. The flames there soared into the sky and dyed the pitch-black sky red. It was obvious how intense the battle was. If the enemy came out in full force, Zhanjiang Pass would most likely be routed thousands of miles away, when it was undefended. However, his lord looked as if she had a well-thought-out plan. Could it be that there was something else going on? Jiang Pingji interrupted his speculation. Why are you in a daze? Qin Gong said, I'm just curious. If the enemy comes out in full force, it seems impossible to defend Zhanjiang Pass. Jiang Pingji said, why not? Do you know what it means to wait for a hare by a stump and catch a turtle in a jar? Qin Gong said, although I'm not as knowledgeable as you, I understand the meaning of the words. My lord, do you mean that the Nia army failed to sneak attack Zhanjiang Pass, and instead fell into our army's counterattack? That's not right. Our troops are all guarding the pass. How can we have extra troops to carry out an ambush? You're half right, Jiang Pingji said. Besides, who told you that the remaining troops of our army are guarding the pass? If one was attentive, he or she would probably discover a very strange thing. The troops that Jiang Pingji brought to guard the pass were about tens of thousands of troops of the Nia army. Tonight, the troops that attacked Jiang Pingji were twice as many as hers. The troops guarding Zhanjiang Pass were also much fewer than the Nia army. So the question was, where did the troops that had disappeared under Jiang Pingji's command go? Qin Gong did not turn around for a while. Jiang Pingji's indifferent face revealed a slight smile. At that moment, she saw the old chief send her a message from the corner of her eye. Your Abba. I can't comment on whether your behavior is right or wrong. I just hope that you can stay true to yourself. Also, there's something I forgot to tell you. It's because your genes awakened much earlier than I expected. There was a flaw in the ancestral atavism gene of the Jiang clan's ancestor. To be more specific, it would affect one's temperament, causing one to be easily angered and unable to control the killing intent and dark emotions in one's heart. Jiang Pingji said, does the old chief think that my decision to sacrifice the troops and horses was influenced by the awakening? Your Abba. No, I'm reminding you not to let the sky brain take advantage of me. I don't want to kill my successor with my own hands. Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. The old chief's words had a deeper meaning. I'm not a 3-year-old kid. How could I be bewitched by him? Your Abba. Nothing is absolute. The Jiangs were so prosperous hundreds of years ago. They had so many talents in the family, but they were still killed. No matter how capable Jiang Pingji was, could she be stronger than those geniuses? Even other people had fallen into the trap of the sky's brain, let alone Jiang Pingji, who was just a little girl in her early 50s. Jiang Pingji rubbed the space between her eyebrows and promised, I'll be careful. Your Abba. You don't have to worry too much about the sequelae of the awakening of the ancient bloodline. Your mind is very stable. You won't be as unlucky as your ancestors. Your current task is to manage your lousy farm well. You've been here for 10 years. Do you still have 3 to 5 years left? Jiang Pingji smiled bitterly to herself. The old chief said it lightly, but she wasn't herself. Jiang Pingji had been in this backward and ignorant era for too long. She originally thought that she would not be able to return to the Federation, so she gave up and managed everything she had. Unexpectedly, the old chief appeared and told her that it was probably a trap set against the sky's brain. At the same time, he tested her to see if she had the qualifications to become a marshal. Jiang Pingji could return to her own era. Why would she waste time and energy in an unfamiliar place? As time went by, such thoughts became clearer and clearer. It affected her mentality more or less. However, no matter what, she did not regret the plan this time. If there was anything she regretted, it was probably that she regretted hiding it from Qin Gong, Bai Ning, and the troops. They unknowingly stepped into the enemy's trap and caused additional casualties. She did not regret anything else. It was fine as long as she had a clear conscience. If she was given another chance, she would do the same thing again. She did not regret sacrificing a small number of people for the sake of overall victory. Jiang Pingji suddenly missed the fruit candy that she loved to eat when she was young. She wanted to return to the Federation, even if it was a place full of danger. 3 to 5 years? Does the old chief mean that when the world is unified, you plan to come and help me share this mess? You Abba. I didn't say anything. Jiang Pingji smiled and teased. Old chief, call me on Yang in advance. You Abba, get lost. Jiang Pingji scratched her head. A huge stone was lifted from her heart. She was really worried that she would waste the rest of her life in this world. If the old chief came to take over, she would not even need to give birth to an heir. Saves trouble. Jiang Pingji sighed with emotion. Qin Gong asked in surprise. What do you mean saves trouble, my lord? Jiang Pingji said. What do you mean by saves trouble in the future? I don't even need to teach her. If she can crawl, I can be exploited as a child laborer. Qin Gong suddenly widened his eyes. He could not help but glance at Jiang Pingji's lower abdomen. My lord has a young master? Then why did she kill so fiercely before? My lord, should I call for a military doctor to take a look at you? Young master, the baby that the military counselors have been looking forward to for almost 10 years is finally coming? Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes at him and said angrily. What are you looking at? I'm fine. I'll clear the thoughts out of your head. Did he really think that she could not see what was going on in his head? At the same time, the situation at Zhanjiang Pass was progressing as Jiang Pingji had expected. Qiguan Rang seized the opportunity to send troops to attack and disrupt the Nia army's formation. The two armies were in a chaotic battle. War cries could be heard everywhere. From time to time, the screams of soldiers who were hit by the fireballs from the catapults could be heard. Qiguan Rang's cold eyes stared at the back of the Nia army, as if he was waiting for something. Reporting military counselor, the orderly was covered in blood. A large piece of skin on his forehead had been sliced off by the enemy's sharp weapon. He looked extremely terrifying, but he seemed to be unaware of it. He reported the changes on the battlefield clearly. The enemy's attack is swift and violent. I'm afraid our army will be defeated. Fear was like a snowball rolling bigger and bigger. The defending troops at Zhanjiang Pass had been defeated by the enemy on the battlefield. They might not be able to make a comeback. Qiguan Rang looked up at the horizon and said, It's time. Someone send the signal. The guard who had been following Qiguan Rang stepped out and said, Yes, sir. As he finished speaking, he took out a thick and strange bamboo tube from his waist and carefully lit it to light the fire. Squeak! A sharp whistling sound was heard. The bamboo tube shot out a beam of red light. It rose to the highest point and suddenly exploded. Qiguan Rang looked at the Nia family, who were fighting fiercely under Erdeo City, and suddenly smiled coldly. Chapter 1543. The sounds of killing covered the sharp whistling of the fireworks. However, when it bloomed, it still attracted the gazes of many people. Wei Yong was one of them. Looking at the dazzling red fireworks, an ominous feeling filled his heart. Guangshan, we will win, right? Wei Yong looked at the fireworks disappearing into the horizon and muttered. Apart from himself, no one else heard him. Despite having an ominous feeling, Wei Yong did not give the order to retreat or do anything else. What a joke! At this moment, The two armies were in a stalemate, and it was impossible for them to back down. Whoever showed signs of weakness would lose. Wei Yong suppressed the worry in his heart. He stared at the changes in the battle while ordering the soldiers to be on high alert to prevent any possible sneak attacks. Unfortunately, Wei Yong did not know that there was a psychological thing called the Murphy effect. The more one did not want something to happen, the more likely it would happen. In less than a quarter of an hour, a blood-soaked messenger suddenly rushed over and shouted at the top of his lungs, reporting. Wei Yong's heart beat even faster. He asked, "What's the matter?" The soldier said, "Tens of thousands of enemy troops suddenly appeared behind us." Behind us? Wei Yong's heart beat even faster. He turned his head to look in the direction of Zhanjiang Pass that they had broken through not long ago. A large number of enemy troops had indeed appeared there and were sneak attacking the weakly defended rear. The enemy's attacks were swift and fierce in front, and there were jackals staring at them from behind. The Nia army was actually surrounded. There were only a few exits in Zhanjiang Pass. In other words, the Nia army had no way to retreat. The enemy's appearance was quite clever. Not only did they attack from the front and back, they also used violence to break up the Nia army's formation, causing the army to fall into chaos. Seeing this, Wei Yong could not help but clench his fists until his knuckles turned white. He clenched his teeth and trembled because of his intense emotions. The Nia army focused on attacking the enemy in front of him. As the two armies were in a stalemate, he did not suspect that the enemy had the strength to split up and ambush them. Who would have thought that the enemy would be so ruthless and patient, not revealing this trump card, even when Zhanjiang Pass was about to be breached? Instead, they had to lure the Nia army into Zhanjiang Pass, and only used this trump card after the two armies fought? Wei Yong was thoroughly convinced by his forbearance. Even though they were pincered by the enemy and the Nia army was in disarray, Wei Yong did not give up. He tried to lead the troops to break out of the encirclement, but Qiguan Rang and the others were determined to keep the Nia army here, not giving them a way out. This slaughter continued from dawn till dusk. Only then did it stop. After a fierce battle, nearly 200,000 Nia soldiers were defeated. In the end, only 20 to 30,000 of them managed to escape. The remaining soldiers were unlucky. When they retreated, they bumped into Jiang Pingji, who was leading the troops back. Once again, they were ruthlessly attacked. When Jiang Pingji returned with her troops, the 5 million idlers in the streaming room were still laughing, but they soon stopped laughing. Zhanjiang Pass was covered in blood. The originally majestic city walls were now full of holes. Every inch of the walls was soaked in the blood of both sides. Jiang Pingji acted as if she didn't see any of this. She rode her horse through the city entrance and entered Zhanjiang Pass. Drip, drip. The salted fishes were shocked to find that there was scarlet blood in the potholes on the ground. Big White's hooves would always splash blood when they stepped into the shallow potholes. Tudafaccio. Streamer, was it raining last night? Kazijio Chi-fan. It doesn't look like it was raining. The salted fishes spoke cautiously. Some of the more sensitive ones found that there was something wrong with the streamer that day. This kind of abnormality made them explode with the desire to live from heaven. All of them kept quiet out of fear. For example, it was probably low air pressure. Just looking at her made one feel a sense of heaviness. It made one's heart feel stuffy, and even breathing felt laborious. Goikai Guofengxio. How is it raining? It's obviously blood. What happened at Zhanjiang Pass last night? Why is there so much blood? Did the Nia army sneak attack again? Streamer, you're not being honest. You should have started streaming last night. It's a pity that you missed it. The salted fishes complained. This was not the first time that Jiang Pingji had secretly eaten alone. In the past, many important battles happened in the middle of the night, but she was unwilling to start streaming. This caused many of the salted fishes to wake up the next day to find that they had slept and the world had turned upside down. Jiang Pingji held the god-slaying sword tightly and closed her eyes slightly. She ignored the salted fish's comments. Further ahead, the salted fishes saw many soldiers moving corpses and cleaning up the battlefield. The broken limbs and wreckage stimulated their eyes. Everywhere they looked was a scene of devastation. Corpses covered the place as far as their eyes could see. They died in different ways. Some of the corpses were still on fire. Even if the salted fishes were used to seeing storms and waves, they could not bear it at that moment. Some even turned their heads and vomited. Bai Ning rode behind her. His dry eyes were bloodshot. He glanced at the corpses and suddenly felt a little emotional. This battle, I don't know if it's a great victory or a Pyrrhic victory. It was obvious that the enemy had sacrificed more soldiers and horses. It could almost be considered a total annihilation, but they had lost 40,000 to 50,000 soldiers. Jiang Pingji looked indifferent and said, "Whether it's a great victory or a Pyrrhic victory, it's still a victory." Bai Ning smiled bitterly and said, "My lord is right. I'm just feeling emotional. In this chaotic world, how many times will this scene repeat?" His injuries were more serious. After emergency treatment by the military doctor, he was not in much danger, but he still needed to recuperate for a month or two. Although he could still ride the horse steadily, in fact, he was forcing himself to hold on. He was not made of iron. He had been fighting for more than 24 hours without sleep and rest. He was also injured and lost blood. An ordinary person would not have been able to hold on. His lord could not be considered a person at all. "How is Feng Jing?" Jiang Pingji asked. Bai Ning smiled and said, "Young people nowadays are not as good at enduring hardships as my generation." Feng Jing was injured so badly that he was lying on the ground. The military doctor reported that the situation was not serious, but the injury was very serious. He needs to rest for 2 months. The wound needs to be taken care of. Otherwise it will fester. Jiang Pingji said, "Squatting in the camp for 2 months is better than losing his life on the battlefield." Bai Ning listened to her and felt a little uncomfortable. He and Qin Gong were not fools. Some things they did not realize at the time, but after the war stopped and they thought about it, they could figure it out. They could not guess the details of the whole layout, but they knew the general direction. If they guessed correctly, the Lord and their 30,000 soldiers were the bait thrown out. Understanding this, Bai Ning did not know what to say. At the same time, he was not in a position to say anything. As the Lord, she had gambled her life. What was Bai Ning and the others? Not to mention that they had survived. Even if they lost their lives, it was a profitable trade to exchange 50,000 soldiers for 200,000 soldiers of the enemy. Bai Ning sighed secretly. Suddenly, he spat and scolded in his heart. This messy world. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.